The hyperspace anomaly registered on Republic sensors as impossible, a spatial distortion that followed no known pattern of galactic physics, appearing without warning in the Coruscant system's outer orbit. Two vessels emerged from the churning dimensional breach, massive warships unlike any design in the Republic's extensive databases. One bore the golden double-headed eagle of the galactic empire of humanity's distant past. The other carried the simple star insignia of the Free Planets Alliance. Both were battered, scarred from recent combat, and utterly out of place in a galaxy that had never seen their like. What happens when two of history's greatest military minds arrive in a galaxy where war itself has become a lie? When tactical genius meets mystical manipulation, when admirals who commanded fleets numbering thousands must rebuild influence from nothing in a universe where the Force binds all things but political strings pull tighter still. Admiral Reinhard von Lohengramm stood on the bridge of his flagship, Brunhild, his golden hair and ice-blue eyes reflecting the viewport's starlight as his tactical officers scrambled to process sensor data that made no sense. The last thing he remembered was the decisive engagement against Yang Wen-li's fleet near Vermilion, the clash that would determine the future of human civilization. Then reality had simply torn, space folding in ways their faster-than-light drives couldn't account for. And now, Admiral, his Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral von Oberstein, reported, his artificial eye glinting with reflected displays. "We are no longer in charted space. None of the star patterns match our astronomical databases. Gravitational readings suggest we're in orbit of a massive ecumenopolis, a planet-wide city that exceeds anything in recorded Imperial history." "The Hyperion," Reinhard said flatly, his strategic mind already adapting to impossible circumstances. Yang's flagship. If the dimensional anomaly had caught them both, then his greatest rival was somewhere in this system. Confirm their status. "Scanning. Contact confirmed. The Alliance flagship is 3,000 kilometers to our starboard, also dead in space. They appear to be conducting similar assessment protocols." Reinhardt's expression revealed nothing, but his mind raced through implications. Stranded in an unknown galaxy with his eternal opponent, both stripped of their fleets, their political backing, their carefully constructed power bases, some men would have despaired. Reinhard von Lohengramm saw opportunity. "Establish communications with Admiral Yang," he ordered. "If we're to understand this situation, we'll need to set aside our differences. Temporarily." Aboard the Hyperion, Admiral Yang Wen-li was having a similar realization, while wishing desperately for brandy that his medical officer had forbidden him months ago. The young admiral, barely 33 but already legendary for his tactical innovations, studied the sensor readings with the patience of someone who'd learned that panic never improved strategic situations. "This is remarkable," his aide, Lieutenant Frederica Greenhill, observed, her usual composure strained by circumstances that defied rational explanation. "Admiral, these readings suggest we've been transported to another universe entirely. Different fundamental physics, different stellar evolution patterns, even different basic constants." "Which means we can't go home through conventional means," Yang finished, rubbing his temples. "Of course, that would be too simple." He glanced at the tactical display showing the Brunhild's position. "And naturally, Reinhard is here too. The universe has a sense of irony." "The Imperial flagship is hailing us, sir." Yang sighed, knowing this conversation was inevitable, but wishing he had more time to prepare. "Put him through." Reinhard von Lohengramm's image materialized in holographic projection, young, aristocratic, burning with ambition that had carried him from minor nobility to supreme commander of the Galactic Empire. His expression held its usual controlled intensity, but Yang detected something else beneath. Curiosity, perhaps even respect. "Admiral Yang," Reinhard said, his voice carrying the formal courtesy of military professionalism. "It appears we face a situation neither the Empire nor the Alliance anticipated." "An understatement worthy of a politician, Admiral Reinhard. Though I suppose we've been transported to another universe does sound absurd even by our standards. I propose a temporary ceasefire. Whatever brought us here, whatever this galaxy holds, we'll learn more through cooperation than through continued hostilities. Agreed?" Yang considered this, his historian's mind cataloging the irony. Two men who dedicated years to destroying each other's forces, now forced to work together because fate had removed every other option. "Agreed, though I doubt either of our governments would approve." "Our governments," Reinhard said with a faintest smile, "are several universes away. We make our own decisions now." Before either could continue, new contacts appeared on their sensors. Dozens of ships dropping out of hyperspace in precise military formation. These vessels were triangular, massive, painted in white and gray with weapons bristling from every surface. Star destroyers, though neither admiral knew the term yet. And at the formation's center, a sleeker vessel broadcasting on all frequencies in a language their computers struggled to translate. Yang's communications officer worked frantically, applying linguistic algorithms that eventually parsed meaning from the transmission. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Republic space without authorization. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Resistance will be met with appropriate force." "Republic," Reinhard murmured, his strategic mind already analyzing implications. A governmental structure, possibly democratic given the classical terminology, but military forces this organized suggest centralized authority. "Or a democracy transitioning toward autocracy," Yang added, his historical expertise identifying patterns. "That formation discipline, the immediate threat of force, these aren't peacekeepers. These are soldiers who've been at war long enough to make military response their first instinct." A new communication channel opened, this one featuring a robed figure whose presence felt different somehow, more centered, calmer, but with an underlying current of authority that went beyond mere rank. "I am Jedi Master Plo Koon, serving with the Grand Army of the Republic. We detected your vessel's unusual arrival and have been dispatched to investigate. Please identify yourselves and explain your presence in Coruscant space." "Jedi," Yang said softly. "Religious warriors, philosopher guardians. Interesting." Reinhard had already made his decision. "This is Admiral Reinhard von Lohengramm of the Galactic Empire Space Fleet. The vessel adjacent is commanded by Admiral Yang Wen-li of the Free Planets Alliance. We have been displaced from our universe by a spatial anomaly. We carry no hostile intent toward your republic and request the opportunity to discuss our situation with appropriate authorities." There was a pause, long enough for Yang to suspect they were consulting with someone, possibly scanning their vessels more thoroughly. When Plo Koon responded, his tone had shifted slightly towards something that might have been wonder. "Your vessels register no weapon signatures we recognize. Your technology operates on principles our sensors find difficult to classify. And your crew life signs suggest you're ordinary humans without any force sensitivity.
Yet you command ships that our strategic analysts estimate could challenge our Star Destroyers in combat. The Jedi's image seemed to study them both with inhuman intensity. The Council will want to meet you. Will you come peacefully to the Jedi Temple?"
Yang and Reinhard exchanged glances across their communication link, a moment of perfect understanding between rivals who'd learned to anticipate each other's thinking. They were being invited into the heart of this galaxy's power structure. Dangerous, but also the fastest way to gather intelligence. "We'll come," Yang said, "though I'd appreciate if someone could explain what force sensitivity means. We're going to need considerable context about this galaxy." The Jedi Temple on Coruscant was exactly what Yang had expected after analyzing their escort's behavior. Massive, ancient, designed to impress and intimidate while maintaining an aesthetic of philosophical tranquility. They'd been permitted to bring small security details. Reinhard chose his most loyal officers, while Yang brought Frederica and a few trusted personnel, and were now being led through corridors that hummed with something neither admiral could quite identify. "Do you feel that?" Frederica whispered. "Like static electricity, but deeper, more pervasive." "The Force, presumably," Yang replied, his analytical mind trying to categorize a phenomenon that seemed to defy materialism. "If I understand correctly from our briefing, it's an energy field generated by living things, binding the galaxy together. Certain individuals can manipulate it through concentration and willpower. The Jedi are the primary practitioners." "Sounds like religious mysticism dressed in scientific language," Reinhard observed from nearby, his skepticism evident. "Useful if true, but I'll reserve judgment until I see demonstrations." They were brought before the Jedi Council, a circular chamber where 12 masters sat in contemplative arrangement, their presence somehow feeling larger than their physical forms suggested. Master Yoda occupied the central position, an ancient being whose species Yang didn't recognize, but whose eyes held centuries of accumulated wisdom. Beside him sat Master Mace Windu, whose intensity reminded Yang uncomfortably of certain aggressive Alliance politicians. Master Plo Koon had joined them, along with others, including a Togruta female who studied the admirals with particular interest. "Welcome to our galaxy, admirals," Mace Windu said, his voice carrying authority that expected obedience. "The Force has shown us possibilities regarding your arrival. Visions, unclear but significant. You come from a universe without the Force, without Jedi or Sith. Yet your peoples wage galactic war on scales we find concerning." "War is what we know," Reinhard said bluntly, no apology in his tone. "The Galactic Empire and Free Planets Alliance have fought for generations. I seek to end that conflict through the establishment of a just autocracy that eliminates the corruption plaguing democratic systems. Admiral Yang opposes me, believing democracy, however flawed, is preferable to any dictatorship, however benevolent." "An honest summary," Yang acknowledged, "though I'd add that I find all war regrettable, all government systems flawed, and most conflicts products of leaders who value power over peace. I fight because someone must defend democracy from those who would dismantle it, even with good intentions." "Interesting philosophies," Master Yoda commented, his syntax unusual but his meaning clear. "Similar to our own struggles, they are. Light and dark, democracy and dictatorship, competing visions of order. Tell me, young admirals, in your universe, How many ships command you? My active fleet numbered 8,000 vessels at last count. The entire Imperial Navy exceeds 25,000 ships. The Alliance maintained approximately 12,000 ships in active service. Our war had been ongoing for over a century before we took command positions. Millions dead, entire worlds devastated, all because we couldn't reconcile incompatible visions of how humanity should govern itself. Several council members exchanged glances, and Yang's strategic instincts noted the concern beneath their composed exteriors. These Jedi were warriors clearly, but they operated on scales smaller than what he and Reinhard considered normal. Their galaxy's largest fleets probably numbered hundreds of ships, perhaps a few thousand at most. The idea of conflicts involving tens of thousands of vessels seemed to unsettle them. You arrive at a pivotal time. The Togruta Jedi, Ahsoka Tano, Yang recalled from the briefing, said. The Republic is engaged in the Clone Wars against the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Separatist forces challenge our government across thousands of worlds. The Jedi serve as generals, leading clone armies in defense of democracy. Yang's expression shifted subtly, his historian's mind immediately identifying concerning patterns. Jedi as generals? Warrior monks commanding military forces in service to a democratic government? That's historically problematic. Religious military orders rarely remain politically neutral once deeply involved in warfare. We serve the Republic, Mace Windu said firmly. The Force guides us toward peace and justice. I'm sure it does, but in my experience, noble intentions don't prevent institutional corruption. How long has this war been ongoing? 1 year, Plo Koon answered. And already the Jedi are serving as military commanders rather than peacekeepers or negotiators? The transition happened quickly. Yang's expression remained respectful, but his implication was clear. This was a government at war changing in ways its participants might not fully recognize. Reinhard, meanwhile, was analyzing from a different angle. This confederacy, what are their stated grievances? What drove them to secession? Corruption in the Senate, excessive taxation, lack of representation for Outer Rim worlds. Some of their complaints are legitimate, but their leadership is controlled by Count Dooku, a former Jedi who turned to the dark side of the Force. The Separatists use droid armies, attacking Republic worlds without mercy. Former Jedi turned dark, Reinhard repeated, his tactical mind noting the pattern. So your order has internal divisions, defectors who can command significant resources, and both sides employ armies that aren't primarily composed of volunteers, clones on one side, droids on the other. Interesting strategic choices.
Master Yoda's eyes narrowed slightly, as if recognizing that these two admirals were analyzing the Clone Wars with uncomfortable precision. Help us, perhaps you could. Brilliant military minds you possess. Experience with large-scale conflict you have. Serve the Republic as strategic advisors, would you consider? Yang and Reinhard exchanged another look, lengthy silent communication passing between them. They were being offered positions within this galaxy's power structure, access to resources and intelligence that could help them understand how to return home. But they were also being recruited into a war neither fully understood by a government neither entirely trusted. I would need to understand more about both sides, Yang said carefully. In my experience, wars aren't simple morality plays with clear heroes and villains. I'd want to examine the Separatists' legitimate grievances, assess whether military solutions are truly necessary, explore diplomatic alternatives. The Separatists don't negotiate, Mace Windu stated flatly. Count Dooku has made his intentions clear. The Republic must fall. Perhaps, but I've found that public positions and actual negotiating stances often differ. Still, I understand your concerns. If I were to advise the Republic, it would be with the understanding that I maintain independence of analysis. I won't rubber-stamp strategies I consider flawed simply because they're popular or politically convenient. I have different conditions, Reinhard said. I'll offer strategic consultation, but I require transparency about the Republic's governmental structure. If I'm to help defend your democracy, I need to understand how it actually functions, not how it presents itself. And I reserve the right to propose reforms if I identify systemic problems that contribute to this conflict. The council members conferred silently, presumably through their Force connection. Yang took the opportunity to study them more carefully, noting body language, power dynamics, who deferred to whom. Yoda was clearly the senior authority, but Mace Windu wielded significant influence. Others seemed more contemplative, perhaps less comfortable with the Jedi's military role. Agree to your conditions, we do, but warn you we must. Investigation too deep, questions too pointed may lead to places dangerous. Politics in the Senate, complex they are. Powerful interests, threatened by scrutiny they would be.
Master Yoda, Yang said with a slight smile, I've spent my entire career making powerful interests uncomfortable. It's practically my specialty. As have I, Reinhard added, though my methods are typically more direct. Between the two of us, we should provide comprehensive analysis. They were assigned quarters in the temple and given access to the Republic's strategic databases, information that both admirals consumed with voracious intensity over the following days. Yang focused on political history, governmental structures, the progression of the Clone Wars from initial outbreak to current status. Reinhard studied military deployments, fleet compositions, tactical patterns from major engagements. What they found troubled them both deeply. This war makes no strategic sense, Reinhard said during their third evening, meeting in neutral quarters to compare notes. Frederica had joined them, along with Oberstein, creating an impromptu staff meeting between former enemies. The Separatists attack in ways that maximize Republic casualties and resource depletion, but they rarely hold territory. It's as if they're trying to bleed the Republic rather than defeat it. And the Republic's response is equally peculiar, Yang added, highlighting sections of the database on his datapad. The Jedi are brilliant peacekeepers being used as frontline commanders, a role they're neither trained for nor temperamentally suited to. The clone army was ordered 10 years ago by a Jedi Master who died immediately after this, but nobody questioned this convenient timing? An entire military force appears exactly when needed, and the Senate just accepts it? The political structure is even more concerning, Frederica observed. Her analysis of Senate proceedings revealed patterns the participants seemed not to notice. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine has been granted emergency powers far exceeding normal executive authority. The Senate votes for these expansions enthusiastically, always with the justification that the war requires it. But the war shows no signs of ending, which means the emergency powers become permanent in all but name.
A classic transition from Republic to Empire, Reinhard said, his historical knowledge paralleling Yang's. It's textbook political manipulation. Create a crisis, present yourself as the only solution, accumulate power in the name of security, eliminate opposition through legal means until the democratic structure exists only as facade. Which means someone is orchestrating this, Yang concluded.
Both sides are being manipulated by an intelligence sophisticated enough to maintain the deception across thousands of worlds, coordinate military and political actions in perfect synchronization, and remain hidden from Jedi who can supposedly sense deception through mystical means. Oberstein's artificial eye whirred as he processed data. The Sith. The databases mentioned them as the Jedi's ancient enemies, Force users who embrace passion and power rather than peace and restraint. The Jedi believe they were destroyed a millennium ago, but several references suggest Siths survived in hiding, waiting for opportunities to strike. Count Dooku is a former Jedi, the separatist leader who supposedly turned to this dark side. What if he's not the mastermind but another pawn? What if there's a Sith Lord manipulating both the Separatists and the Republic, engineering the entire war? That would require someone with access to both sides, Young thoughtfully said. Someone trusted by the Republic, probably in a position of significant authority. Someone who could coordinate Separatist actions while simultaneously directing Republic responses to maximize conflict rather than resolution. They all reached the same conclusion simultaneously, the logical chain too clear to deny once examined objectively. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, Frederica whispered. It has to be. He's the only one positioned perfectly to control both sides. We can't prove it, Yang cautioned. Everything we've identified is circumstantial, patterns that suggest manipulation but don't provide concrete evidence. And if we're wrong, if we accuse the Republic's leader of treason based on strategic analysis alone, we'll be dismissed as paranoid outsiders who don't understand this galaxy. Then we need proof, Reinhard said, his ice-blue eyes cold with determination. And we need to be careful. If Palpatine is truly a Sith Lord orchestrating a galactic war, he's dangerous in ways we don't fully comprehend. These force powers, this ability to manipulate minds and perceive intentions, we're at a significant disadvantage.
We've always been at a disadvantage, Yang replied with a wry smile. Inferior resources, worse strategic positions, less political support. That's been my entire career. The question isn't whether we're outmatched. It's whether we can find an angle that turns our disadvantages into leverage. What do you suggest? Yang stood, pacing as he organized his thoughts into actionable strategy. We do what we do best. I'll take a fleet, whatever the Republic is willing to give me, and demonstrate that their current tactical approach is fundamentally flawed. Show them that victory is possible without the grinding attrition that serves Palpatine's agenda. Meanwhile, Reinhard, you stay here on Coruscant. Work within the Senate, build relationships, position yourself to investigate the Chancellor directly. You want me doing politics while you fight battles. Reinhardt's tone suggested the arrangement offended his sense of proper roles. I want you where your talents for cutting through bureaucratic nonsense will be most effective. I'm a better tactician than you. Yang ignored Reinhardt's slight bristle. But you're a better leader, more charismatic, more politically effective, better at inspiring loyalty quickly. If anyone can build a power base on Coruscant fast enough to challenge Palpatine, it's you. Reinhard considered this, his ambition warring with his pride, before pragmatism won. Very well. But Yang, be careful. These Jedi may not be as perceptive as they believe, but Force users are still dangerous. Don't assume tactical brilliance alone will protect you. I never assume anything protects me. That's why I'm still alive. They parted that night as temporary allies, two admirals from different universes, opposite sides of their own war, now cooperating against a threat neither fully understood.
The Jedi Council had no idea what they'd unleashed by bringing these two military geniuses into the Clone Wars. And Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, sitting in his office reviewing intelligence reports about the newcomers, smiled with dark satisfaction. New variables, new pieces on the board, new opportunities for manipulation. He'd built an empire through patience and planning. Two admirals from another universe, however brilliant, wouldn't change that. Would they?
The Republic's Senate chamber was a monument to democratic aspiration. Thousands of floating platforms arranged in concentric circles, each representing worlds and sectors across the galaxy, all focused on a central podium where Supreme Chancellor Palpatine presided over debates with grandfatherly patience. Reinhard von Lohengramm stood in the observation gallery, studying the proceedings with the analytical precision that had made him the Galactic Empire's youngest ever supreme commander. What he saw disgusted him. Not because the Senate was corrupt. He had expected corruption, had built his career dismantling the entrenched aristocracy that plagued his own universe's political systems. What disgusted him was the inefficiency. Senators spoke for hours without saying anything substantive. Procedural motions consumed entire sessions. Critical military appropriations were delayed by representatives pursuing personal grievances or factional advantages completely unrelated to the war effort. And through it all, Palpatine orchestrated the chaos with such subtle mastery that most participants seemed unaware they were being manipulated. Impressive, isn't it? A voice behind him, Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan, one of the few politicians who'd sought out Reinhard's perspective rather than viewing him as a curiosity or threat. The senator was younger than many of his colleagues, still idealistic, but with enough pragmatic awareness to recognize the Republic's systemic problems. Democracy is only as effective as its implementation, Reinhard said, his aristocratic accent carrying across the gallery. Your Republic has allowed form to supersede function. The mechanisms of representation have become more important than the outcomes they're meant to produce. And you believe autocracy is superior? Organa's tone was challenging but not hostile, genuinely interested in the perspective of someone from a universe where the debate between democracy and dictatorship had escalated to century-long warfare. I believe effective government requires clarity of authority and accountability of leadership. Your Senate diffuses responsibility across thousands of representatives, which means nobody is truly accountable for failures. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine has accumulated extraordinary power, yes, but he did so through democratic processes. Your system handed him emergency authority because it couldn't function efficiently under its own principles. Organa was silent for a moment, watching as another procedural debate consumed another hour of session time. You're not wrong. But the alternative, concentrating power in a single individual, assumes that individual will be benevolent. What happens when they're not? Then the system has failed, regardless of its structure, Reinhard replied. A corrupt democracy and a corrupt autocracy both produce oppression. The question is, which system can be reformed more readily? Which adapts faster to changing circumstances? Which serves its people's interests more effectively? I don't claim autocracy is inherently superior. I claim that, in practice, given human nature, a brilliant autocrat will outperform a committee of well-meaning representatives. And you consider yourself that brilliant autocrat? Reinhard smiled, the expression cold and self-aware. I consider myself someone capable of recognizing systemic dysfunction and imposing solutions, whether popular or not. But that's irrelevant here. This isn't my galaxy to reform. I'm simply observing." "Are you?" Organa studied him with the perception of someone who'd survived decades in Senate politics. "Admiral Reinhard, you've been here 2 weeks, and you've already built relationships with a dozen influential senators. You've submitted 3 strategic analyses that contradicted Jedi Council recommendations, analyses that proved correct when field commanders followed your advice instead. The Supreme Chancellor has requested private meetings with you twice. You're not just observing, you're positioning."
"Force of habit," Reinhard admitted. "I've spent my life maneuvering within political systems. Pattern recognition and network building are instinctive at this point." Before Organa could respond, a commotion erupted in the Senate chamber below. Palpatine was calling for a vote on expanded military spending, another authorization for clone production, another appropriation for warship construction. The measures would pass overwhelmingly, as they always did. Security required it. The war demanded it. Democracy itself depended on military victory. Watching the choreographed process, Reinhard recognized the pattern that he and Yang had identified. Every vote strengthened Palpatine's position. Every authorization eroded Senate oversight. Every emergency measure became precedent for the next expansion of executive authority. It was masterful political engineering, corruption so gradual and systematically implemented that participants couldn't perceive the overall trajectory. "Senator Organa," Reinhard said quietly, "if I wanted to investigate the Supreme Chancellor's activities discreetly, without alerting him or his supporters, where would I start?" Organa's expression shifted to alarm. "That's an extraordinarily dangerous question. Palpatine has been the Republic's leader for over a decade. He's popular, effective by conventional measures, supported by the majority of Senate factions. Investigating him would be considered treason by many." "But not by you," Reinhard observed, "or you would have already reported this conversation to security." "I've had concerns," Organa admitted carefully. "Nothing concrete, just unease about how smoothly everything aligns with the Chancellor's agenda. But concerns aren't evidence, and evidence would require resources I don't have. The Supreme Chancellor's office is protected by layers of security, constitutional privilege, and political allies who would destroy anyone attempting unauthorized investigation. Unless the investigator had legitimate authorization, military intelligence gathering perhaps, under the justification of strategic threat assessment. You don't have that authority. You're a foreign consultant, not a Republic officer." Reinhard's smile widened slightly. "Not yet."
Meanwhile, Yang Wen-li stood on the bridge of the Republic cruiser Endurance, studying a tactical situation that every military instinct told him was deliberately designed to produce maximum casualties with minimum strategic gain. The Jedi Council had assigned him to support General Anakin Skywalker, a young, aggressive Jedi whose reputation for bold tactics preceded him in the defense of the Christophsis system. The Separatists had committed a significant fleet. The Republic was outnumbered approximately 2-1, and standard doctrine called for defensive positions until reinforcements arrived. Standard doctrine, Yang had learned, was how this war had dragged on for a year, with neither side gaining decisive advantage. "Admiral Yang," Skywalker said,
his tone carrying the confident enthusiasm of someone who never lost a battle through caution. "We need to hold this position for at least 6 hours until General Kenobi arrives with the relief fleet. I'm thinking we establish a defensive screen here," he indicated the tactical display, "and use the cruiser's superior firepower to create a kill zone that forces the Separatists to either withdraw or commit to costly frontal assault." "That's certainly one approach," Yang said mildly, studying the dispositions with the eye of someone who'd fought outnumbered battles across multiple star systems. "How many ships would you estimate we'd lose implementing that strategy?" "Acceptable losses. Maybe 20% of the fleet, mostly lighter vessels, but we'd hold the planet." 20% of your personnel are clones, correct? Living beings, not droids or machines. Skywalker's expression shifted slightly, recognizing the moral dimension Yang was introducing. "The clones are soldiers. They understand the risks. And yes, before you ask, I value their lives. But we're at war, Admiral. Sacrifices are necessary to defend democracy." "Agreed. But unnecessary sacrifices serve no one except the war's perpetuation. Tell me, General, why is Christophsis strategically important?" "It's a major trade hub, controls hyperspace routes to—" "I've read the briefing," Yang interrupted gently. "I'm asking you personally, do you believe this battle matters? If we hold Christophsis, does the Republic gain meaningful strategic advantage? If we lose it, does the Republic suffer critical damage? Or is this simply another engagement in a pattern of mutual attrition that's defined this war since its beginning?"
Skywalker was silent for a moment, clearly unused to having his strategic assumptions questioned so directly. His Padawan learner, Ahsoka Tano, the same Togruta Jedi who'd been present at Ying's first council meeting, stepped forward with diplomatic intervention. "Admiral Ying, I understand you're new to our galaxy, but General Skywalker has won dozens of battles. His instincts are probably excellent for small unit tactics and force-enhanced combat," Ying agreed. "But large-scale strategic thinking requires different skills. No offense intended, General. You're clearly a capable warrior. But commanding fleets isn't the same as leading clone battalions, and the Jedi's philosophical training doesn't emphasize the kind of systematic analysis necessary for effective naval warfare." "Then enlighten me," Skywalker said, his tone carrying challenge but also genuine curiosity. "How would you handle this situation?" Ying pulled up the tactical display, his fingers dancing across controls as he highlighted specific elements. "The Separatists have numerical advantage, yes, approximately 40 capital ships versus our 23. But look at their formation. They're deployed in standard battle lines, maximizing firepower projection but creating predictable patterns. Their droid control ships are positioned here, here, and here. Centralized command nodes that coordinate their autonomous fleet elements." "Standard Separatist doctrine," Ahsoka observed. "We've seen it dozens of times." "Exactly, which means they expect standard Republic response, defensive positioning, attrition warfare, eventual reinforcement. They've planned for that scenario. What they haven't planned for is someone who doesn't fight by your galaxy's conventions." Yang highlighted a different section of the battlefield. "We're going to abandon Christophsis." "What?" Skywalker's shock was evident. "Abandon the planet? That's surrender." "It's tactical withdrawal with strategic purpose," Yang corrected. "We'll broadcast evacuation orders, make it obvious we're pulling out, allow the Separatists to believe they've won. Their fleet will advance to occupy the planet, maintaining formation because they assume the battle is over. But we won't actually leave. He manipulated the display, showing how Republic ships could use Christophsis' moons as cover, hiding in sensor shadows while broadcasting false telemetry suggesting full retreat. Once the Separatist fleet commits to occupation, spreading their forces to land troops and establish control, we emerge simultaneously from multiple vectors, not attacking their main battle line, attacking their command ships specifically with concentrated firepower designed to create cascading coordination failures. "You want to decapitate their command structure," Anakin said, understanding dawning. Without centralized control, their droid ships become less effective, their coordination deteriorates. "And we won't need to destroy their entire fleet," Yang continued. "Just create enough chaos that they withdraw to regroup. We retain Christophsis with minimal casualties, demonstrate that Republic forces can outthink Separatist numerical advantage, and, most importantly, we deny the enemy their expected attrition outcome. Wars aren't won by trading losses until one side exhausts their resources. Wars are won by making the cost of continued conflict exceed the value of potential gains."
Ahsoka studied the plan with growing appreciation. "It's risky. If they detect our ships in the moon shadows, if their sensors are better than we anticipate, then we adapt," Yang said simply. "But risk is inherent to warfare. The question is whether we accept predictable losses following conventional doctrine or accept calculated risks, attempting something unexpected. I prefer the latter." Skywalker looked at Yang with new respect, the Jedi's tactical instincts recognizing genius even when it contradicted his training. "All right, Admiral, we'll do it your way. But if this fails, then you can return to standard attrition warfare and I'll accept responsibility for the failure. But it won't fail. Trust me, General, I've made a career of winning battles I had no business surviving." The Battle of Christophsis unfolded exactly as Yang had predicted, much to the Separatist forces' confusion and the Republic fleet's astonishment. The feigned retreat appeared convincing. Republic cruisers broadcasting damage. Ahsoka studied the plan with growing appreciation. "It's risky. If they detect our ships in the moon shadows, if their sensors are better than we anticipate, then we adapt," Yang said simply. "But risk is inherent to warfare. The question is whether we accept predictable losses following conventional doctrine or accept calculated risks attempting something unexpected. I prefer the latter." Skywalker looked at Yang with new respect, the Jedi's tactical instincts recognizing genius even when it contradicted his training. "All right, Admiral, we'll do it your way. But if this fails, then you can return to standard attrition warfare, and I'll accept responsibility for the failure. But it won't fail. Trust me, General. I've made a career of winning battles I had no business surviving." The Battle of Christophsis unfolded exactly as Yang had predicted, much to the Separatist forces' confusion and the Republic fleet's astonishment. The feigned retreat appeared convincing. Republic cruisers broadcasting damage reports, clone commanders transmitting evacuation authorizations, every signal suggesting defeat. The Separatist Admiral, a tactical droid designated TJ-912, calculated victory probabilities at 94% and ordered full planetary occupation, which was exactly when Yang's hidden fleet emerged from the moon shadows, their targeting computers already locked on the 3 droid control ships that coordinated the Separatist battle network. The attack was surgical, overwhelming, and devastating. Concentrated fire from Republic cruisers coordinated by Yang personally, his tactical displays showing firing solutions calculated to microsecond precision, destroyed 2 control ships within 90 seconds.
The third managed to raise shields, but by then its fleet coordination had fractured. Individual droid ships, suddenly operating on pre-programmed autonomous protocols rather than centralized intelligence, made predictable tactical choices that Yang's forces exploited mercilessly.
The battle lasted 18 minutes. Republic casualties, 1 light cruiser damaged, 37 clone troopers wounded, 0 fatalities. Separatist casualties, 3 capital ships destroyed, 14 damaged badly enough to require withdrawal, approximately 30,000 battle droids rendered inoperative. It was the most one-sided Republic victory of the Clone Wars to date. Incredible, Ahsoka breathed, watching as the surviving Separatist forces retreated in disorder. We didn't just win, we dominated. And we did it with minimal losses against superior numbers using tactics I've never seen before. It's basic principles, Yang said, modestly, though internal satisfaction at proving his methods remained effective in this universe showed in his slight smile. Identify enemy weaknesses, exploit them with disproportionate force, create cascading failures that multiply effectiveness beyond raw numerical advantage. Every competent admiral in my universe understands these concepts. In your universe, maybe, Skywalker said, his respect now genuine. Here, we've been fighting this war for a year without anyone suggesting anything like what you just demonstrated. The Jedi Council needs to see this. The entire Republic military needs to see this. Which brings us to an important question, Yang said, his expression growing more serious as he turned from the tactical display. General Skywalker, in your experience, do the Separatists typically commit forces to battles they can't win? Do they usually accept massive casualties without strategic gain? Or does something about today's engagement feel off? Anakin frowned, his Force instincts picking up on Yang's implication. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that an enemy fighting a war of conquest doesn't waste resources the way the Separatists consistently do. They attack in strength, but withdraw before achieving decisive victory. They commit to engagements that serve no clear strategic purpose. It's as if their goal isn't to win the war, it's to ensure the war continues, which raises the question, who benefits from prolonged conflict? Count Dooku leads the Separatists. He's a Sith Lord, dedicated to destroying the Republic. Why would he want the war to continue rather than achieve quick victory?
Because maybe he's not the actual leadership, Yang replied carefully. Maybe the Separatists and the Republic are both being manipulated by someone who benefits from galactic-scale warfare. Someone who needs chaos and fear to accumulate power that couldn't be gained during peacetime. The implications hung in the air. Too dangerous to voice explicitly on a military vessel where communications might be monitored. But Yang could see understanding dawning in both Jedi's expressions. The recognition that their war might be orchestrated, that their enemies might be puppets rather than true opponents. We should discuss this with the Council, Skywalker said finally. And with Admiral Reinhard. If there's a larger conspiracy, then we need proof before making accusations. Suspicion isn't evidence. But yes, we should coordinate. Between what Reinhard has observed in the Senate and what we've seen on the battlefield, we might be able to construct a compelling case. 3 weeks after the Battle of Christophsis, Reinhard and Yang met in a secure location. Not the Jedi Temple, which they'd begun to suspect might be monitored, but in private quarters provided by Senator Organa, who'd become their primary political ally. The senator had assembled a small group, himself, Mon Mothma of Chandrila, Padme Amidala of Naboo, and a few other senators who'd expressed concerns about emergency powers and executive overreach. "Thank you for coming," Organa began.
Admirals Reinhard and Yang have requested this meeting to discuss strategic concerns that may have political implications. We believe Supreme Chancellor Palpatine is a Sith Lord, orchestrating the Clone Wars, Yang said bluntly, deciding that diplomatic phrasing would waste time they didn't have. We believe he's manipulating both the Republic and the Separatists, ensuring the war continues indefinitely while he accumulates power that will eventually allow him to transform the Republic into an autocratic empire. The senator's reactions ranged from shock to skepticism to, in Mon Mothma's case, grim recognition of fears she'd apparently harbored privately. "That's an extraordinary accusation," Padme said carefully. "What evidence supports this theory?"
Reinhard activated a holographic display, pulling up compiled data from 3 weeks of investigation. Strategic patterns first. Every major battle has been won by whichever side had tactical advantage, but neither side has gained decisive strategic momentum. Territories change hands, resources are depleted, casualties mount, but the war's overall trajectory remains static. Someone is ensuring equilibrium. Second, Yang continued, political patterns. Every emergency measure, every expansion of executive authority, every erosion of Senate oversight has been justified by war necessity. But the war itself shows signs of deliberate perpetuation. Separatist attacks rarely target Republic assets that would end the conflict. They target assets that justify continued military buildup. Third, historical analysis. Reinhard pulled up centuries of Republic history. "I've studied your government's evolution. The transition from stable democracy to emergency autocracy follows textbook patterns of constitutional subversion. It's too systematic to be coincidental, too perfectly executed to be merely opportunistic. Someone planned this decades in advance." Finally, Yang said quietly, there's Count Dooku, a former Jedi who supposedly leads the Separatists, who supposedly turned to the dark side. But his tactical decisions consistently serve Republic propaganda interests more than Separatist victory. He's a puppet, just like the Separatist Council. And if he's a puppet, someone is pulling his strings, someone skilled in dark side manipulation, positioned within the Republic itself. Senator Amidala looked shaken. "Palpatine was senator of Naboo when I first entered politics. I've known him for years. He saved my planet during the Trade Federation occupation. He's been a mentor, a friend. I can't believe." "Which makes him perfect for the role," Reinhard said, not unkindly. "The most effective tyrants don't appear tyrannical. They present themselves as saviors, mentors, reluctant leaders accepting power only because circumstances demand it. By the time people recognize the deception, they've already surrendered the mechanisms that could stop them." "What you're describing," Mon Mothma said slowly, "is treason on a scale beyond anything in Republic history. If you're right, Palpatine has spent decades positioning himself for this moment, manipulating billions of beings, causing a war that's killed millions, all to replace democracy with dictatorship. The evidence would need to be absolutely conclusive to convince the Senate." "We know," Yang acknowledged, "which is why we need your help. We're outsiders, foreign consultants with no political standing, but you're established senators with credibility and networks. Between our strategic analysis and your political positioning, we might be able to force an investigation."
"Or we might trigger the very coup we're trying to prevent," Organa cautioned. "If Palpatine is truly a Sith Lord, confronting him prematurely could be catastrophic. The Jedi barely defeated the Sith a millennium ago, and that was with their entire order at full strength. Now we have a fraction of that, scattered across the galaxy fighting a war." "Then we need to be strategic," Reinhard said, his tactical mind already formulating approach vectors. "We don't confront Palpatine directly. We undermine his support structure, expose contradictions in his narrative, create circumstances where he's forced to reveal himself.
Yang and I have extensive experience fighting opponents we couldn't defeat through direct confrontation. Misdirection, asymmetric warfare, strategic positioning, these are tools we've mastered. There's something else, Yang added. The Jedi Council needs to know. Master Yoda, Master Windu, they have force abilities we don't understand, perceptions that might detect deception we can't. If we coordinate properly, combine our different capabilities. The Jedi serve the Republic, Senator Amidala interrupted, her tone carrying warning. If they believe the Supreme Chancellor is a threat, they might act precipitously. The Order answers to the Senate in theory, but they have autonomous authority in practice. We need to be certain before involving them. The debate continued for another hour. Careful analysis of risks and potential approaches, weighing certainty of threat against danger of premature action. Finally, they reached consensus. Continued investigation, careful documentation, strategic positioning to create multiple expose vectors if direct confrontation became necessary. As the meeting dispersed, Yang and Reinhard found themselves alone in the secure quarters, surrounded by data displays and tactical projections. We've fought each other for years, led fleets numbering thousands, waged battles across multiple star systems, dedicated ourselves to opposing visions of human government. And now here we are in another universe entirely, collaborating against a threat neither of us fully understands. Ironic, though not unpleasant. You're a brilliant strategist, Yang. Under different circumstances, we might have been allies rather than enemies. Under different circumstances, you might have been the tyrant I was fighting against, Yang countered, but without hostility. Your vision of benevolent autocracy assumes the autocrat remains benevolent. What happens when you're gone, when your successor lacks your principles, or when power corrupts even your intentions?
The same thing that happens when democracy becomes so corrupt that citizens stop participating, when representatives serve special interests rather than constituents, when the system collapses under its own dysfunction. Reinhard gestured toward the Senate data. We've both seen government fail, Yang. The question isn't which system is inherently superior, it's who implements it, how they maintain it, whether they have the will to do what's necessary even when unpopular. And you believe you have that will? I know I do. Just as you know you'd defend democracy even if it meant personal destruction. Reinhard studied his rival with genuine respect. We're more similar than you admit, both willing to sacrifice for principles, both capable of seeing past immediate circumstances to long-term consequences. The difference is which principles we've chosen to defend. Yang smiled ruefully. This is the longest conversation we've had without trying to kill each other. It's almost pleasant. Don't get used to it, Reinhard replied, though his tone suggested he'd come to value Yang's perspective despite their ideological differences. The Free Planets Alliance and Galactic Empire aren't going to reconcile just because their admirals had to cooperate in another universe. Probably not, but maybe, just maybe, we'll both approach that conflict differently, having seen how manipulation and orchestrated warfare serve only the manipulator, never the people supposedly benefiting from victory. They stood in silence for a moment, two brilliant minds from opposite sides of a galactic war, united temporarily by circumstance and mutual recognition of a threat that transcended their own conflict. In his office across Coruscant, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine reviewed intelligence reports about the two admirals' recent activities. Their investigations were becoming concerning, their strategic insights dangerous, their influence spreading faster than anticipated. But he'd planned for variables, he'd prepared for unexpected complications. And two admirals from another universe, however brilliant, couldn't stop momentum,
built over decades of meticulous preparation. The Sith had waited a millennium for this moment. They wouldn't be denied by foreign strategists who didn't even understand the Force. The investigation into Supreme Chancellor Palpatine required tools that neither Yang nor Reinhard possessed. Access to classified intelligence networks, authorization to examine financial records protected by executive privilege, and, most critically, the ability to operate without immediately alerting their target. What they needed was someone already positioned within the Republic's security apparatus, someone whose suspicions had already been quietly building, someone with both the resources and the motivation to pursue truth regardless of political consequences. They found that person in Commander Fox, leader of the Coruscant Guard. The clone officer had served on the capital world since the war's beginning, responsible for Senate security and executive protection. He'd witnessed every emergency powers expansion, every constitutional erosion, every gradual transformation of the Republic he'd been created to defend. Unlike many of his brothers fighting on distant battlefields, Fox had front-row seats to political maneuvering that increasingly troubled his tactical mind, a mind designed for strategic thinking, despite the Senate's tendency to treat clones as expendable assets rather than sentient beings. Reinhard approached him directly during a routine security briefing that had become a weekly coordination between the Admiral's consultation work and Senate protection protocols. "Commander Fox," Reinhard said after the official briefing concluded, his tone shifting to something more confidential. "I need your honest assessment. In your observation, does the Supreme Chancellor's behavior suggest someone genuinely dedicated to preserving the Republic, or someone systematically positioning for long-term power consolidation?" Fox's expression remained neutral. Clones were trained to avoid political commentary, but his eyes revealed calculation that went beyond simple soldier's discipline. "Admiral Reinhard, that's an inappropriate question for military personnel to answer honestly," Reinhard interrupted, his aristocratic authority cutting through military protocol. "I'm not asking for testimony or official statement. I'm asking for the tactical assessment of someone who's observed thousands of hours of political behavior and recognized patterns others miss."
The clone commander was silent for a long moment, internal conflict visible in his rigid posture. Finally, the Supreme Chancellor requisitioned Senate Guard deployments that create vulnerability in legislative security while strengthening executive protection. He schedules emergency sessions during periods when opposition senators are statistically most likely to be absent. His office processes intelligence reports before sharing them with the Jedi Council, and approximately 37% of battlefield intelligence proves strategically misleading upon post-engagement analysis. "You've been documenting this," Reinhard observed with satisfaction. "It's my job to notice security patterns, whether those observations constitute evidence of malicious intent or simply aggressive political maneuvering." Fox's tone carried frustration. "I'm a clone commander, Admiral. Nobody cares about my strategic assessments. They care whether I can protect senators and maintain order." "I care," Reinhard said bluntly, "and I have authorization from Senators Organa, Mothma, and Amidala to conduct discrete strategic threat assessment, which means I can deputize military personnel for investigative support under that authorization, if you're willing." Fox studied him with the intensity of someone evaluating risk versus principle. "What exactly are you investigating?" "The possibility that the Clone Wars are being orchestrated by someone positioned to benefit from prolonged conflict, someone with access to both Republic and Separatist strategic planning, someone who spent decades positioning themselves for the moment when democracy becomes so dysfunctional that autocracy appears preferable. The Supreme Chancellor. "I didn't say that," Reinhard replied carefully. "You drew that conclusion independently based on your own observations." Another long silence. Then, Fox straightened. Military decision made. "What do you need?" Yang, meanwhile, had returned to the front lines, not because he enjoyed warfare, but because battlefield observations provided intelligence that sanitized reports couldn't capture. He'd been assigned to support General Obi-Wan Kenobi, a Jedi whose reputation for diplomatic negotiation and defensive tactics made him natural counterpart to Skywalker's aggressive approach.
They were conducting a relief operation on Ryloth, a Twi'lek homeworld suffering under Separatist occupation. The tactical situation was complex, significant civilian population requiring protection, dug-in Separatist forces with superior defensive positioning, and terrain that favored the occupiers. Standard doctrine suggested lengthy siege warfare, gradual attrition until the Separatist supply lines collapsed. Yang proposed something different. "We're going to surrender," he announced during the command briefing, to the shock of every Republic officer present. "Surrender?" General Kenobi's diplomatic composure cracked slightly. "Admiral Yang, I recognize your tactical brilliance has been proven at Christophsis, but—" "Fake surrender," Yang clarified, pulling up holographic projections showing Ryloth's occupied capital. "The Separatists expect prolonged resistance, prepared for months of urban warfare that would devastate the city and kill thousands of civilians. Instead, we broadcast surrender terms, request negotiation for peaceful transition, make ourselves appear defeated and desperate. Then we use the negotiation period to position forces for simultaneous strikes against their command infrastructure. Deception violates the Jedi Code's emphasis on honesty," Kenobi observed, though his tone suggested philosophical discomfort rather than absolute opposition. "War itself violates ideals about honesty and peace," Yang replied. "The question is whether we prioritize philosophical purity or civilian lives. Every day this siege continues, Ryloth's people suffer. I'm offering a way to end their suffering in 72 hours rather than 72 days." A Twi'lek resistance leader named Cham Syndulla, who'd been coordinating with Republic forces, spoke up from the holographic communication. "The Separatists have been brutal occupiers, Admiral Yang. They execute civilians suspected of resistance activity, confiscate resources, treat my people as resources rather than sentient beings. If your plan can liberate Ryloth without turning our cities into battlefields, we'll support it."
"The plan requires precise coordination," Yang continued, highlighting specific elements. "The Twi'lek resistance provides intelligence about Separatist patrol patterns and command facility locations. Republic Special Forces, clone commandos I believe they're called, infiltrate the capital during negotiation periods, positioning demolition charges and assassination assets. Meanwhile, the main fleet appears to withdraw in defeat, creating the impression that we're abandoning Ryloth entirely. And when the Separatists believe they've won, we activate everything simultaneously. Command facilities destroyed by internal demolitions, key officers eliminated by commandos. Main fleet returns immediately, attacking confused and leaderless droid forces. The entire Separatist occupation collapses within hours, and Ryloth is liberated before they can implement scorched earth protocols." Kenobi stroked his beard, Jedi wisdom recognizing tactical merit despite philosophical concerns. "It's ruthless, effective, potentially brilliant, but ruthless. The Jedi Order traditionally favors direct confrontation over deception, which is why the Jedi Order has been fighting this war for a year without decisive victories," Yang said, not unkindly. "General Kenobi,
I respect your principles, but principles that prioritize process over outcomes serve the privileged, not the vulnerable. The Twi'lek people don't care whether their liberation was achieved through honorable warfare or deceptive tactics. They care about survival. Syndulla nodded emphatically. The Admiral speaks truth, General. My people need liberation, not philosophical debate about proper military conduct. The operation proceeded according to Yang's specifications, each element coordinated with precision that reflected his decades of experience orchestrating complex campaigns. The fake surrender negotiations bought 72 hours, time for clone commandos to infiltrate, for resistance fighters to position themselves, for the Republic fleet to reposition beyond immediate sensor range while maintaining rapid response capability.
When Yang gave the signal, Ryloth's liberation was swift and devastating. Separatist command facilities erupted in precisely timed explosions. Officers coordinating the occupation found themselves targeted by commandos who'd been hiding in plain sight. The droid army, suddenly without centralized control, reverted to basic defensive protocols that the coordinated Republic resistance assault overwhelmed in minutes. Total civilian casualties, 43, mostly from collateral damage during the final assault. Compare that to the projected thousands who would have died in conventional siege warfare, and Yang's tactical decision became undeniable ethical superiority despite philosophical objections. But something bothered him about the operation's aftermath. "General Kenobi," Yang said quietly as they surveyed the liberated capital, "the Separatists' occupation protocols, did they seem designed for long-term territorial control or for generating maximum resentment and resistance?" "What do you mean?" "Their governance was brutal enough to ensure constant rebellion, which justified continued military presence, which consumed resources without providing strategic value. It's as if they wanted Ryloth to be a perpetual problem rather than a successfully integrated territory. Why would an occupying force deliberately create conditions ensuring their occupation remains costly and unstable?" Kenobi's expression shifted as Yang's implication registered. "You're suggesting the occupation itself was theater, that the Separatists' goal wasn't to hold Ryloth, but to create situations requiring Republic military response, which keeps both sides engaged in warfare that serves neither's actual interests. Who benefits from that dynamic, General?" Kenobi said slowly, his force sensitivity picking up the darker implications. "Someone manipulating both sides, someone who needs the war to continue, who orchestrates engagements that appear meaningful but serve only to perpetuate conflict. Admiral Yang, these theories you and Admiral Reinhard have been developing, you believe the war itself is a lie. I believe the war is a tool, a means of reshaping galactic civilization through manufactured crisis. And I believe whoever's orchestrating this is positioned so perfectly, hidden so skillfully, that even Jedi masters with mystical perception abilities haven't detected them."
That would require... Kenobi hesitated, clearly reluctant to voice the conclusion. It would require someone skilled in Sith deception techniques, someone who could hide their dark side presence from Jedi's senses, someone positioned at the Republic's highest levels. Yes, Yang agreed quietly. It would require exactly that. The evidence was accumulating faster than even Reinhard had anticipated, thanks to Commander Fox's meticulous documentation and Yang's battlefield observations. Financial records showed suspicious patterns, Republic military contracts awarded to corporations with hidden separatist connections, intelligence reports that consistently led Republic forces into disadvantageous engagements.
emergency appropriations that somehow funded both sides of the conflict through labyrinthine financial networks. Senator Organa's coalition had grown to include a dozen influential representatives, all sharing concerns about executive overreach and constitutional erosion. They'd begun coordinating with sympathetic Jedi, Master Shak Ti, who'd observed clone training protocols and questioned the Army's convenient origins, Master Plo Koon, whose tactical experience made him suspicious of battlefield patterns, even Ahsoka Tano, whose youth made her less bound by institutional orthodoxy. But the Jedi Council's leadership remained resistant. "Your theories are troubling," Master Windu acknowledged during a tense council session where Reinhard and Yang presented their compiled evidence. "But they're also circumstantial. Pattern analysis and strategic suspicion don't constitute proof of Sith infiltration at the highest levels of government." "What would constitute proof?" Reinhard asked, his frustration barely contained. "Do you need Supreme Chancellor Palpatine to openly declare himself a Sith Lord while demonstrating dark side powers? By that point, whatever coup he's planning will already be complete. We cannot accuse the Republic's elected leader of treason based on financial irregularities and tactical analysis. The political consequences would be catastrophic. The Senate would fracture. Public confidence would collapse. The war effort would be compromised."
"The war effort is already compromised," Yang said, his usual diplomatic patience worn thin. "The war effort is the compromise, a manufactured conflict designed to transform the Republic into an empire. Every day we delay investigation because of political concerns is another day Palpatine consolidates power that will eventually be used to destroy everything you claim to protect." Master Yoda, who'd been silent throughout the debate, finally spoke. "Strong your convictions are, persuasive your evidence may be, but rush to judgment the Jedi cannot. Patience the Force teaches. Observation, wisdom requires." "Patience is a luxury," Reinhard said coldly. "One you can afford because you wield mystical powers and command institutional authority. But for the citizens suffering through manufactured warfare, for the clones dying in battles that serve manipulated agendas, patience is just another word for complicity." The accusation hung in the council chamber, sharp enough to draw shocked reactions from several masters. Jedi didn't tolerate criticism of their methods, especially from outsiders who'd been in this galaxy mere weeks. But before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the temple. Communications channels erupted with emergency traffic, and through the Force, every Jedi present felt a disturbance unlike anything they'd experienced. Concentrated dark side energy manifesting somewhere on Coruscant itself. "The Chancellor," Master Windu said, his tactical instincts recognizing ambush. "It's happening now. Whatever conspiracy you've uncovered—" He didn't finish the sentence. The council members were already moving, lightsabers igniting, rushing toward speeders that would carry them to the Senate district. Yang and Reinhard followed, their strategic minds racing through implications. If Palpatine was revealing himself now, it meant he'd detected our investigation, which meant he was moving to preemptive action rather than allowing exposure, which meant the coup they'd been trying to prevent was beginning right now, and they were rushing toward it without clear understanding of what they'd face.
"This is bad tactics," Yang muttered to Reinhard as they boarded a speeder following the Jedi strike team. "We're reacting rather than positioning, responding to his timeline rather than dictating our own. Everything about this feels like we're being manipulated into exactly the confrontation he wants." "Agreed," Reinhard said. "But retreating now means abandoning whatever opportunity this represents. We advance, but cautiously,
ready to adapt if the situation deviates from expectations. They arrived at the Senate office building to find chaos. Senate guards lying unconscious or dead, emergency protocols activated, and in the Supreme Chancellor's office, lightsaber combat unlike anything either admiral had witnessed. Master Windu was dueling Palpatine, except Palpatine was no longer the kindly politician. His face had transformed into something twisted by dark-side corruption, his hands generating force lightning, his movements impossibly fast despite apparent frailty. "The Jedi are traitors!" Palpatine's voice carried through the building's emergency broadcast systems, his political genius operating even during combat. "They've attempted to assassinate the Supreme Chancellor. I'm declaring Order 66. All clone forces are hereby commanded to execute their Jedi commanders for treason against the Republic." Yang and Reinhard both recognized the moment for what it was, the trap springing shut. The entire Clone Wars had been positioning for this, creating an army loyal to Palpatine's command authority, spreading Jedi across the galaxy where they'd be isolated and vulnerable, engineering a crisis that would justify their elimination while appearing to be defensive necessity rather than orchestrated purge. "We need to countermand that order," Reinhardt said immediately, turning to Commander Fox, who'd accompanied them. "Your command codes. Can you override emergency protocols?" Fox's expression was anguished, his helmet's HUD presumably displaying the Order 66 command that every clone's behavioral programming was designed to execute. "The order. I can feel the compulsion, the programming, but..." He struggled visibly, biological imperatives warring with conscious will. "I'm resistant, more than I should be. Why?"
"Because you've been thinking independently," Yang said, gripping the clone's shoulder. "Because you've spent weeks making strategic assessments rather than following orders blindly. The programming is strong, but consciousness is stronger. Commander, I need you to contact every clone officer you can reach. Tell them the order is falsified, that the Jedi Eraser aren't traitors, that this is a coup attempt by the Chancellor himself. They won't believe me. The programming..." "Some will," Reinhard insisted. "Not all, maybe not even most, but some clones will have developed enough independent thought to question. Those few might be enough to create doubt, to slow the purge, to give the Jedi time to respond." In Palpatine's office, the duel was reaching its conclusion. Windu had driven the Sith Lord back, his lightsaber at Palpatine's throat, victory apparently achieved, but Yang's strategic instincts screamed warning. Palpatine looked defeated, but nothing in his body language suggested genuine fear. This was theater, staged confrontation designed to produce a specific outcome. "He's waiting for something, or someone. This is..." Anakin Skywalker burst into the office, his expression desperate and confused. The young Jedi had clearly received conflicting information, reports of Jedi treason, emergency summons from the Chancellor, everything designed to create precisely this moment of indecision. "Anakin," Windu said, without taking his eyes off Palpatine, "this is the Sith Lord we've been searching for. He orchestrated the entire war. We were right. The Republic is under his control." "I'm too weak," Palpatine gasped, his voice carrying pathos that was clearly calculated. "Master Jedi, please, don't kill me. I surrender. The Senate will decide my fate. Democracy will prevail." "You'll twist the Senate just as you've twisted everything else. You're too dangerous to be kept alive." And in that moment, Yang understood Palpatine's brilliance. The Sith Lord had engineered a scenario where killing him would validate every accusation he'd made, that the Jedi had abandoned their principles, that they'd become arrogant autocrats willing to execute political leaders without trial, that democracy required protection from warrior monks who served their own mystical agenda.
"Master Windu, stop." Yang shouted across the office. That's exactly what he wants. You kill him without trial. You prove every accusation he's made. You turn the Senate against the Jedi Order, permanently. But he was too late. Skywalker, torn between loyalty to his Jedi mentors and desperate need to save someone precious to him. Padme, Yang's intelligence suggested, the forbidden attachment that Palpatine had been exploiting, made his choice. His lightsaber flashed, severing Windu's sword hand, and in that instant of vulnerability, Palpatine struck. Force lightning erupted, not the controlled technique he'd used in combat, but raw dark side fury unleashed without restraint. Windu's body was thrown through the window, falling hundreds of stories to distant Coruscant streets below. "The Jedi have been destroyed," Palpatine announced, his voice transmitted across every military channel simultaneously. "The attempt on my life has left me scarred and deformed, but I assure you, my resolve has never been stronger. In order to ensure our security and continuing stability, the Republic will be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire for a safe and secure society." And across the galaxy, in 1,000 battles on 1,000 worlds, clone troopers turned on their Jedi commanders and opened fire. Reinhard and Yang stood in the Senate office building, watching democracy die through political manipulation and manufactured crisis, witnessing the culmination of a plan so perfectly executed that even their combined strategic genius hadn't prevented it. "We failed," Reinhard said quietly, his usual confidence shaken. "We saw it coming, we gathered evidence, we tried to warn them, and we still failed." "Not completely," Yang replied, pointing to where Commander Fox was coordinating with other Coruscant Guard officers, transmitting countermanding orders, creating just enough confusion in the clone command structure that some Jedi might escape. "We didn't stop the coup, but we might have saved a few lives. Sometimes that's all strategy can accomplish, reducing losses rather than achieving victory."
Palpatine. Now Emperor Palpatine, though the official declaration would come in days, turned his attention to them for the first time since the confrontation began. His yellow eyes gleamed with dark amusement and terrible intelligence. "The admirals from another universe," he said, his voice carrying none of the grandfatherly warmth it had held before. "So brilliant, so strategic, so convinced you could outmaneuver me. Did you truly believe that tactical genius alone could overcome decades of preparation and Sith mastery accumulated over a millennium?" "No," Yang admitted. "We believed that exposing your conspiracy might create opportunities for resistance. We were half right. The exposure is beginning. But the resistance," he gestured toward the chaos spreading across Coruscant, "that will take time we didn't have."
"You interest me," Palpatine continued, studying them with the intensity of someone evaluating pieces on a game board. "Unitary minds from a universe where wars are fought on scales exceeding even this galaxy's conflict. Strategists who recognized my plans when the Jedi, for all their mystical perception, remained blind. I could use officers of your caliber. Join me. Help build this empire into something that spans universes, not merely galaxies." "I've spent my life opposing tyrants," Yang said flatly. "I'm not about to serve one." "And I intend to build my own empire," Reinhard added, his pride recovering despite strategic defeat. "Not serve someone else's vision." Palpatine smiled, the expression terrifying in its complete absence of warmth. "Then you've chosen to become obstacles. How unfortunate. Lord Vader," he gestured toward Anakin Skywalker, who knelt before him with expression transformed from conflicted Jedi to something darker. "These admirals are enemies of the Empire. Eliminate them."
Yang and Reinhard didn't wait for Vader's response. They'd already identified exit vectors, already calculated escape probabilities, already accepted that their investigation's failure meant they'd become fugitives in a galaxy transforming from flawed democracy to explicit autocracy. They ran, using the chaos of the coup to disappear into Coruscant's endless urban sprawl, while behind them, the Galactic Empire was born, and the greatest political manipulation in this galaxy's history reached its culmination. The question now wasn't whether they could stop Palpatine. It was whether they could survive long enough to build resistance against him.
"Because you've been thinking independently," Yang said, gripping the clone's shoulder. "Because you've spent weeks making strategic assessments rather than following orders blindly. The programming is strong, but consciousness is stronger. Commander, I need you to contact every clone officer you can reach. Tell them the order is falsified, that the Jedi Eraser aren't traitors, that this is a coup attempt by the Chancellor himself. They won't believe me. The programming—" "Some will," Reinhard insisted. "Not all, maybe not even most, but some clones will have developed enough independent thought to question. Those few might be enough to create doubt, to slow the purge, to give the Jedi time to respond." In Palpatine's office, the duel was reaching its conclusion. Windu had driven the Sith Lord back, his lightsaber at Palpatine's throat, victory apparently achieved, but Yang's strategic instincts screamed warning. Palpatine looked defeated, but nothing in his body language suggested genuine fear. This was theater, staged confrontation designed to produce a specific outcome. "He's waiting for something, or someone. This is—" Anakin Skywalker burst into the office, his expression desperate and confused. The young Jedi had clearly received conflicting information, reports of Jedi treason, emergency summons from the Chancellor, everything designed to create precisely this moment of indecision. "Anakin," Windu said, without taking his eyes off Palpatine, "this is the Sith Lord we've been searching for. He orchestrated the entire war. We were right. The Republic is under his control." "I'm too weak," Palpatine gasped, his voice carrying pathos that was clearly calculated. "Master Jedi, please, don't kill me. I surrender. The Senate will decide my fate. Democracy will prevail." "You'll twist the Senate just as you've twisted everything else. You're too dangerous to be kept alive." And in that moment, Yang understood Palpatine's brilliance. The Sith Lord had engineered a scenario where killing him would validate every accusation he'd made, that the Jedi had abandoned their principles, that they'd become arrogant autocrats willing to execute political leaders without trial, that democracy required protection from warrior monks who served their own mystical agenda.
The Coruscant underworld had existed for millennia, layers upon layers of city built over ancient infrastructure, creating a vertical stratification where the elite lived in penthouses touching clouds, while billions dwelled in perpetual twilight. Yang and Reinhard had descended 40 levels in 3 hours, using maintenance tunnels and abandoned transit systems that Commander Fox had mapped for them before sacrificing himself to buy their escape. The clone officer's final transmission had been brief. "Find the rebellion, build it properly, make this mean something." They'd lost him minutes later, his life signs fluttering as Imperial forces, former Republic guards now swearing allegiance to Emperor Palpatine, cornered his position. Fox had held long enough for several Jedi to escape Coruscant, long enough for Yang and Reinhard to disappear into urban anonymity, long enough to prove that clone programming could be overcome by conscious will and moral conviction. His death wouldn't be meaningless. They'd ensure that. "We need to reach Bail Organa," Yang said. checking a commandeered datapad that still had fragmented access to public networks. If any senator survived Palpatine's consolidation, it's him, and he'll be organizing resistance. It's the logical response to coup conditions. Agreed, Reinhard replied, his tactical mind already calculating next moves despite the crushing weight of strategic failure. But we're fugitives now, marked as enemies of the Empire. Our faces will be distributed to every security checkpoint, every surveillance system. Conventional escape is impossible. Then we use unconventional methods. Yang pulled up schematics of Coruscant's lower levels, highlighting a particular district. The Entertainment District, level 1313. Criminal syndicates maintain smuggling operations there, moving goods and people off-world without Imperial scrutiny. If we can reach the right contacts, you're suggesting we employ criminals. I'm suggesting we employ people with resources we lack and motivations that align with ours. The criminal underworld has no love for centralized authority that threatens their operations. The Empire will crack down on their activities eventually. That makes us temporary allies of convenience. They navigated deeper into Coruscant's depths, where architecture from millennia past created urban canyons that never saw natural light. Here, the Empire's transformation was less immediately visible. These people had always lived under systems that exploited them, had learned to survive through networks that operated outside governmental control. A change in rulers meant little when you'd never benefited from any ruler's policies.
The cantina Yang identified, based on intelligence Fox had provided weeks ago during initial investigations into Coruscant's power structures, was exactly what they'd expected. Dim lighting, suspicious patrons, an atmosphere of calculated danger maintained by beings who'd survived through wariness and violence. The bartender, a Deveronian whose horns had been partially broken in past conflicts, studied them with the assessment of someone evaluating threat level versus profit potential. "You're the admirals," he said, flatly, not a question. "The ones who tried to stop Palpatine's coup. There's already bounty notices circulating, 50,000 credits each, alive preferred but not required." "Then you know we can pay more than that," Reinhard said, placing a credit chip on the bar, funds they'd secured from Senator Organa's emergency accounts before fleeing. "We need transport off Coruscant, discreet passage to Alderaan, and communications equipment that can't be traced by Imperial intelligence. Can you provide that, or should we find someone who can?" The Deveronian's expression shifted to something resembling respect. "Direct. I appreciate that. Most core worlders come down here pretending they're not desperate, trying to negotiate from non-existent positions of strength. You," he gestured at both admirals, "you understand your buyers in a seller's market. Smart." "We understand practicality," Yang corrected, "and we understand that the Empire's consolidation will eventually threaten your operations. Palpatine won't tolerate criminal syndicates operating outside his control. He'll crack down, hard, once he's secured political legitimacy. Which means you have maybe 6 months before this underworld becomes significantly more dangerous." "And you're offering what? Advanced warning? Strategic consultation?" "We're offering the possibility that an organized resistance might create enough chaos to keep the Empire distracted from smaller-scale criminal operations. We're offering information about Imperial military deployments, strategic planning, vulnerabilities that could be exploited by those with appropriate motivation, and," Yang leaned forward slightly, "we're offering to remember who helped us when we were fugitives, once this Empire eventually falls."
The bartender was silent for a long moment, weighing risks against potential gains with the calculated precision of someone who'd survived decades in Coruscant's underworld. Finally,
"There's a freighter leaving in 3 hours. Level 1305, docking bay 47. Captain Varus owes me favors and hates Imperials for reasons involving his family on Alderaan. He'll get you to Organa's homeworld, no questions asked. The communications equipment, he produced a small device from beneath the bar, is military grade, stolen from Republic stockpiles before they became Imperial stockpiles. Encrypted, difficult to trace, good for maybe a dozen transmissions before security algorithms crack it. Price, Reinhard asked. Your credit chip plus a promise. When this resistance you're planning takes shape, when you need people who can move through places official military can't reach, you remember that the underworld helped first. Agreed, Yang said, recognizing a fair transaction when he saw one. Though I should warn you, we're not planning just any resistance. We're planning to build something that can actually defeat the Empire, not just annoy it. That will require strategic discipline, coordination, sacrifice that goes beyond individual profit. Sounds exhausting, the Deveronian replied with a grin that showed too many teeth, but possibly profitable in the long term. Good luck, Admirals. You'll need it. The freighter, Distant Star, was a Corellian YT model, old enough to have seen the Republic's founding and scarred enough to suggest its captain's life had been eventful. Varus himself was human, middle-aged, with the weathered appearance of someone who'd spent decades in space and preferred it that way. He asked no questions when they boarded, simply gestured toward the cargo bay where they could hide if Imperial inspections occurred, and plotted a course toward Alderaan using hyperspace routes that avoided major traffic lanes. The bartender was silent for a long moment, weighing risks against potential gains with the calculated precision of someone who'd survived decades in Coruscant's underworld. Finally, "There's a freighter leaving in 3 hours, level 1305, docking bay 47. Captain Varus owes me favors and hates Imperials for reasons involving his family on Alderaan. He'll get you to Organa's homeworld, no questions asked." The communications equipment, he produced a small device from beneath the bar, is military grade, stolen from Republic stockpiles before they became Imperial stockpiles. Encrypted, difficult to trace, good for maybe a dozen transmissions before security algorithms crack it. Price, Reinhard asked. Your credit chip plus a promise. When this resistance you're planning takes shape, when you need people who can move through places official military can't reach, you remember that the underworld helped first. Agreed, Yang said, recognizing a fair transaction when he saw one. Though I should warn you, we're not planning just any resistance. We're planning to build something that can actually defeat the Empire, not just annoy it. That will require strategic discipline, coordination, sacrifice that goes beyond individual profit. Sounds exhausting, the Deveronian replied with a grin that showed too many teeth, but possibly profitable in the long term. Good luck, Admirals. You'll need it. The freighter, Distant Star, was a Corellian YT model, old enough to have seen the Republic's founding and scarred enough to suggest its captain's life had been eventful. Varus himself was human, middle-aged, with the weathered appearance of someone who'd spent decades in space and preferred it that way. He asked no questions when they boarded, simply gestured toward the cargo bay where they could hide if Imperial inspections occurred, and plotted a course toward Alderaan using hyperspace routes that avoided major traffic lanes.
The cantina Yang identified, based on intelligence Fox had provided weeks ago during initial investigations into Coruscant's power structures, was exactly what they'd expected. Dim lighting, suspicious patrons, an atmosphere of calculated danger maintained by beings who'd survived through wariness and violence. The bartender, a Deveronian whose horns had been partially broken in past conflicts, studied them with the assessment of someone evaluating threat level versus profit potential. "You're the Admirals," he said, flatly, not a question. "The ones who tried to stop Palpatine's coup. There's already bounty notices circulating, 50,000 credits each, alive preferred but not required." "Then you know we can pay more than that,"
Reinhard said, placing a credit chip on the bar, funds they'd secured from Senator Organa's emergency accounts before fleeing. We need transport off Coruscant, discreet passage to Alderaan, and communications equipment that can't be traced by Imperial intelligence. Can you provide that, or should we find someone who can? The Deveronian's expression shifted to something resembling respect. Direct. I appreciate that. Most core worlders come down here pretending they're not desperate, trying to negotiate from non-existent positions of strength. You, he gestured at both admirals, you understand your buyers in a seller's market. Smart. We understand practicality, Yang corrected, and we understand that the Empire's consolidation will eventually threaten your operations. Palpatine won't tolerate criminal syndicates operating outside his control. He'll crack down hard once he's secured political legitimacy, which means you have maybe 6 months before this underworld becomes significantly more dangerous. And you're offering what? Advanced warning? Strategic consultation? We're offering the possibility that an organized resistance might create enough chaos to keep the Empire distracted from smaller-scale criminal operations. We're offering information about Imperial military deployments, strategic planning, vulnerabilities that could be exploited by those with appropriate motivation, and, Yang leaned forward slightly, we're offering to remember who helped us when we were fugitives once this empire eventually falls.
You survived, Organa said, his diplomatic composure strained by recent trauma. The senator had escaped Coruscant aboard a diplomatic vessel, had watched from orbit as the Jedi Temple burned and clone troopers executed Order 66 across the capital. His voice carried exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. I've received reports, dozens of Jedi dead, hundreds more missing and presumed eliminated. The Senate has been dissolved, replaced by appointed governors who answered directly to the Emperor. Everything we tried to prevent has happened. Not everything, Yang replied gently. Some Jedi survived. Commander Fox bought time for several council members to escape, and we're here, which means the resistance isn't starting from nothing. We have experienced leadership, strategic knowledge, and most importantly, we have proof that Palpatine orchestrated the entire war. Proof that won't convince anyone who benefits from the new order, Mon Mothma said, emerging from the estate's interior. The senator from Chandrila looked as exhausted as Organa, her usual diplomatic poise barely maintained. I've been monitoring Imperial broadcasts. Palpatine's narrative is perfect. The Jedi attempted a coup, he defended democracy through emergency measures. The Empire is a necessary evolution to ensure security. The public is accepting it because the alternative is confronting uncomfortable truths about manipulation and betrayal. Then we make them confront those truths, Reinhard said with characteristic directness. We conduct operations that expose the Empire's lies. We demonstrate that security through oppression isn't actually security. We give people reasons to question the narrative they're being sold. With what resources? Organa asked, gesturing helplessly at the handful of people gathered in his estate. A few senators, 2 foreign admirals, no military forces, no political authority. We're fugitives, Admiral Reinhard. The Empire controls every major institution, every military asset, every communications network. We have nothing except ideals and determination, which, history suggests, are insufficient for defeating autocratic regimes. History from this galaxy, perhaps, but in our universe, I've spent my career fighting from positions of inferior resources against enemies with overwhelming advantages. The Free Planets Alliance was always outnumbered, always outgunned, always struggling against an empire that controlled more territory and commanded larger fleets. We survived through strategic asymmetry, avoiding battles we couldn't win, exploiting enemy weaknesses, turning their strengths into vulnerabilities.
He pulled up the strategic framework he and Reinhard had developed aboard Distant Star, holographic displays showing organizational structures and operational priorities. This is what we're proposing, not a traditional military resistance. You can't match the Empire's conventional forces. Instead, a network-based insurgency that operates in spaces where Imperial power is weakest, that builds parallel governance structures in systems abandoned or neglected by centralized authority, that demonstrates through existence that the Emperor's control isn't absolute. We divide the resistance into cells, Reinhard continued, highlighting specific elements. Each cell operates independently, with minimal communication between groups. This prevents Imperial infiltration from compromising the entire network. Each cell has specific roles. Some focus on intelligence gathering, others on logistics and supply chain development, others on direct action against Imperial targets. Coordination happens through designated liaisons who maintain contact protocols designed to minimize vulnerability. For political legitimacy, we establish a provisional government in exile. Senators Organa, Mothma, Amidala, if she survived, Yang noted their expressions suggested she had, barely, provide democratic representation. You'll coordinate diplomatic efforts, maintain communication with systems considering resistance, present the public face of opposition to Imperial rule. Military command structure requires officers with experience, but also with loyalty to the resistance rather than lingering attachment to the Republic military. Some clone commanders resisted Order 66. We find them, recruit them, build forces around officers who've proven they can overcome programming and think independently. And most importantly, Reinhard's expression was intense, aristocratic features carved from determination. We think generationally. This won't be a short war. The Empire is too entrenched, too powerful, too systematically constructed for quick victory. We're planning for decades, possibly longer, which means establishing institutions that can survive leadership transitions, that can adapt to changing circumstances, that can maintain operational effectiveness across generations if necessary. The gathered senators exchanged glances, processing strategic frameworks that went beyond their experience. They were politicians, diplomats, accustomed to negotiation and legislative maneuvering. What Yang and Reinhard were proposing was total war, prosecuted through patient, systematic resistance.
"You're asking us to dedicate our lives to this," Padme Amidala said quietly, her presence surprising. Yang had thought she might have remained on Coruscant, might have tried maintaining relationship with Anakin Skywalker despite his transformation into Darth Vader. Her decision to flee suggested strength of principle over personal attachment. To build something that might not achieve victory in our lifetimes, that might require our children and grandchildren to finish what we start. "Yes," Yang said simply, "that's exactly what we're asking, because that's what defeating the Empire requires." Palpatine spent decades positioning for his coup. We'll need similar patience, similar systematic preparation, similar willingness to think beyond immediate circumstances. "And what's your stake in this?" Mon Mothma asked, studying both admirals with sharp political assessment. "You're from another universe. You have no loyalty to this galaxy. You could potentially find a way home and abandon our conflict entirely. Why should we trust you to lead resistance efforts when your commitment is questionable?" It was Reinhard who answered, his voice carrying conviction that transcended political calculation. "Because I've spent my life opposing corrupt systems that oppress populations in the name of order. Because I recognize Palpatine's tactics. They're identical to the aristocratic exploitation I've fought against in my own universe. Because," his expression hardened,
I was beginning to believe that benevolent autocracy might be superior to dysfunctional democracy. Palpatine has reminded me why that belief is dangerous, why consolidated power inevitably corrupts, why democracy, however flawed, remains preferable to any dictatorship. And I, Yang added quietly, have dedicated my career to defending democracy even when I questioned its effectiveness. I've watched good people die for ideals that seemed increasingly hollow, wondered whether my opposition to autocracy was principle or just stubbornness. Your galaxy has given me something I didn't expect: clarity. Watching Palpatine's manipulation, seeing how manufactured crisis becomes justification for oppression, I've remembered why democracy matters. Not because it's efficient or perfect, but because it distributes power and requires accountability that autocracy can never provide.
He met Organa's eyes with complete sincerity. We may never return to our universe. The dimensional rift that brought us here is gone, and we have no clear path home, which means this galaxy is where we'll live, where we'll fight, where we'll probably die. That makes its fate our concern, whether we intended that or not. The silence stretched, heavy with implications and decisions that would shape decades. Finally, Bail Organa stood, his diplomatic bearing recovering as he made the choice that would define the rest of his life. "Then we're founding a rebellion," he said formally, "the Alliance to Restore the Republic, because we're not creating something new, we're fighting to reclaim what the Empire stole. Admirals Reinhard and Yang, I'm offering you joint command of military operations with full authority to develop strategic plans and organizational structures. Senators Mothma, Amidala, and myself will form the provisional civilian government, providing political legitimacy and diplomatic coordination." "We'll need symbols," Mon Mothma added, her political instincts recognizing practical necessities. "Visual representation that distinguishes us from the Empire, that evokes the Republic's ideals without being bound to its institutions, something that inspires hope." "A starbird," Padme suggested, sketching the design that would eventually become the rebellion's icon. "Simple, elegant, representing freedom and aspiration, something even the illiterate can recognize, something that can be drawn on walls and transmitted across limited bandwidth communications." "Agreed, though symbols alone won't build a rebellion. We need immediate actions, rescuing surviving Jedi, securing supply caches before the Empire claims them, establishing safe houses across the galaxy. Captain Varus has already agreed to coordinate smuggler networks. We need to expand that, recruit others with similar capabilities and motivations." "I'll coordinate Jedi rescue operations," Organa said. "My diplomatic credentials remain valid. The Empire has not yet revoked senatorial privileges. I can travel relatively freely while that window remains open." "I'll work on recruiting disillusioned Imperial officers," Reinhard added. "There will be Republic military personnel who question their transition to Imperial service, who recognize the coup for what it was. Those individuals are valuable. They have training, tactical knowledge, and existing security clearances that could provide intelligence access." "And I," Yang smiled slightly, the expression carrying dark humor, "will begin planning the impossible. How to defeat an empire that controls the galaxy, using resources we don't yet have, with forces that don't yet exist, against an enemy who's already won the opening campaign of this war."
"No pressure," Varys commented from the doorway, where he'd been listening to the entire conversation. "Just overthrowing the most powerful regime in galactic history should be simple." "Nothing about this will be simple," Yang agreed. "But simple problems don't require admirals from another universe. They require exactly what we've always provided:
Strategic brilliance applied to impossible situations, producing victories that conventional thinking insists are unattainable. "And if we fail," Mon Mothma asked quietly, "then we fail honorably, fighting for principles we believe in, against an enemy we recognize as evil, in a cause that matters regardless of outcome. I've accepted worse bargains in my career." The rebellion had begun, not with armies or fleets, not with popular uprising or spontaneous resistance, but with a handful of fugitives in an estate on Aldarian, planning the longest campaign any of them would ever fight. The Empire had won the first battle. The war was just beginning.
3 years. That's how long Yang and Reinhard had been building the rebellion from scattered fugitives into a functional military force capable of challenging, if not yet defeating, the Galactic Empire. 3 years of patient, systematic preparation, of recruiting disillusioned Imperial officers and clone deserters, of establishing supply networks and intelligence cells, of conducting operations designed more to demonstrate continued resistance than achieve decisive victories. 3 years during which the Empire had consolidated its power, transformed Star Destroyers from Republic vessels into symbols of oppression, and replaced clone troopers with recruited stormtroopers whose loyalty was bought rather than programmed. The rebellion's hidden base on Dantooine, a remote agricultural world with minimal Imperial presence, hummed with activity that would have seemed impossible during those desperate early days on Alderaan. Hangars sheltered stolen Imperial shuttles and donated freighters. Training grounds hosted former Republic soldiers teaching insurgency tactics to volunteers from 100 worlds. Communication centers coordinated operations across the Outer Rim. And in the Central Command Facility, Yang and Reinhardt studied tactical displays showing the Empire's latest strategic movements with the focused intensity that had defined their careers. "The Emperor is building something," Reinhardt said, highlighting construction activity near Geonosis. Imperial intelligence reports call it the Death Star, a battle station larger than any vessel in recorded history, mobile, heavily armed, and according to our sources inside the Imperial weapons development program, capable of destroying entire planets. Yang studied the projections with his characteristic analytical calm, though his historian's mind recognized the implications immediately. A planet killer, the ultimate terror weapon. Not designed for military victory. You don't need that level of firepower for fleet engagements. Designed for political control through fear. One demonstration would traumatize the galaxy into submission. "Our window for meaningful resistance is closing," Reinhard continued, his tactical assessment brutal in its honesty. "Once that station becomes operational, the rebellion's entire strategic approach becomes obsolete. We've been building parallel governance structures, demonstrating that Imperial control isn't absolute, encouraging systems to resist through our existence. But if the Empire can destroy entire worlds that support us, our protection becomes a liability rather than an asset."
Which means we need to destroy the Death Star before it becomes operational. Or at minimum, we need to acquire intelligence about its capabilities and vulnerabilities that might enable future operations against it. Yang pulled up different data, financial records, personnel assignments, supply requisitions. The project has consumed enormous resources. Entire Imperial sectors have been taxed beyond sustainability to fund construction. That creates opportunities. Systems resentful of the burden. Officials who question whether planet-destroying weapons serve any legitimate purpose. And it requires specialized personnel,
Reinhard added, following Yang's strategic reasoning. Scientists, engineers, weapons designers, people with technical knowledge about the system's weaknesses, its operational requirements, people who might be persuaded to defect if approached correctly. Before they could continue their analysis, an aide interrupted. A former Republic intelligence officer named Cassian Andor, who'd become one of the rebellion's most effective operatives. "Admirals, we have a situation. One of our deep cover agents on Coruscant just transmitted emergency intelligence. The Emperor is planning a trap." "Explain," Yang said, his strategic instincts immediately alert to danger. "Our recruiting efforts among Imperial officers have been noticed. The Emperor knows we're targeting disillusioned personnel, knows we're offering them positions in rebellion military structures. So Palpatine is feeding us false intelligence about a high-ranking admiral who supposedly wants to defect, Admiral Terranald Screed, commander of the Imperial fleet at Fondor. According to the leaked information, Screed is disgusted by Imperial atrocities and wants to bring his entire battle group to the rebellion." "It's a trap," Reinhard said immediately. "Obviously. The intelligence is too perfect, the offer too valuable. Screed is probably one of the Emperor's most loyal commanders, and this defection is designed to lure us into ambush conditions where our leadership can be eliminated." "Agreed," Yang confirmed. "Which raises the question, do we take the bait anyway?"
The room fell silent, strategic minds processing the counterintuitive suggestion. Cassian frowned, clearly questioning whether he'd heard correctly. "Admiral Yang, you just acknowledged it's a trap. Why would we deliberately walk into—" "Because sometimes the optimal strategic move is the one your enemy doesn't expect," Yang explained, pulling up projections showing Fondor's strategic position. "The Emperor believes we're cautious, that we've survived 3 years through risk aversion and careful planning. He's designed a trap that accounts for those characteristics, obvious enough that we'll recognize the deception, therefore obvious enough that we'll avoid it. But what if we don't avoid it? What if we recognize the trap and spring it anyway, but on terms we dictate rather than terms he's established?" Reinhard's expression shifted to something resembling his old predatory smile, the look he'd worn during their universe's most audacious campaigns. "You want to conduct a raid on Fondor, not to recruit a non-existent defector, but to steal intelligence about the Death Star project. Use the Emperor's trap as cover for an operation he won't anticipate because he assumes we're too smart to fall for his deception." "Exactly. Fondor is a major Imperial shipyard, currently constructing components for the Death Star. Their computer systems will contain technical specifications, operational plans, supply chain data, information we desperately need if we're going to have any chance of countering that battle station." "It's still extraordinarily dangerous," Cassian observed. "Even if we're not walking blindly into the trap, we're still conducting a raid on one of the Empire's most heavily defended facilities. The casualties could be catastrophic." "Which is why we're not sending conventional forces. We're sending a small infiltration team, special operations personnel with technical expertise, capable of penetrating Imperial security and extracting data without triggering full military response. The defection meeting with Admiral Screed becomes distraction, drawing Imperial attention while our real operatives work elsewhere in the facility." "Who leads the infiltration?" Reinhard asked, already knowing the answer but wanting confirmation.
"I do," Yang replied. "I've spent 3 years coordinating from command centers, planning operations for others to execute. But this mission requires someone who can adapt to changing circumstances, who can think strategically while operating tactically. Someone the Emperor wouldn't expect to take personal risks because his intelligence profile suggests I avoid direct combat.
Then I'm coming with you, Reinhard insisted, for the same reasons. The Emperor believes we're cautious administrators, content to command from safety. Proving that assessment wrong creates psychological advantage, forces Imperial planners to recalculate their assumptions about our decision-making patterns. Plus, Reinhard added with characteristic honesty, I'm tired of watching others fight while I push strategic projections around holographic displays. I'm a fleet admiral, but I've also personally led boarding actions and ground operations. Command from the rear is necessary, but occasionally commanders need to remember what actual combat feels like. Yang smiled slightly, recognizing his rival's reasoning. Agreed, though Senator Organa will object strenuously. He'll argue that risking both military commanders in a single operation is terrible strategic planning. Senator Organa, Reinhard replied, isn't a military commander. He's a politician who understands diplomacy and governance, but not warfare. We're not risking the rebellion's leadership. We've spent 3 years training subordinate officers specifically so the command structure can survive individual losses. We're demonstrating that this rebellion's leadership doesn't ask soldiers to accept risks they're unwilling to face themselves. The operations planning consumed 2 weeks. 2 weeks during which Yang and Reinhard assembled the infiltration team, studied Fondor's security protocols, and developed contingency plans for the dozens of ways their mission could fail catastrophically. The team was small by necessity. 8 personnel total, including both admirals. Cassian Andor provided special operations expertise. A Bothan slicer named Koth Melon handled computer infiltration. 2 former clone commandos, Gregor and Wolf, who'd overcome their Order 66 programming and joined the rebellion, provided combat support. A Mon Calamari engineer named Radis offered technical knowledge for interpreting Death Star specifications, and a young pilot named Hera Syndulla commanded their insertion vessel.
This is suicide, Senator Organa said during the final briefing, his diplomatic composure completely abandoned in favor of genuine fear for people he'd come to consider friends. You're flying into the heart of an Imperial trap, hoping to steal intelligence the Emperor has specifically positioned to bait you, with a team of 8 people against an entire battle group? If you're captured, if you're killed, the rebellion loses its military leadership and the Emperor gains propaganda victory that could break resistance morale across the galaxy. If we don't acquire intelligence about the Death Star, Yang countered calmly, the rebellion becomes irrelevant the moment that battle station destroys its first world. We'll be resistance fighters protesting an enemy that can eliminate our safe havens with single shots. This operation is high risk, yes, but avoiding risk guarantees eventual defeat. I could order you not to go, Organa said, though his tone suggested he knew the threat was empty. You could, Reinhard agreed, but you won't, because you're intelligent enough to recognize that military operations require military leadership, and we're the most qualified officers the rebellion possesses. You've trusted our strategic judgment for 3 years. Trust it now. The senator was silent for a long moment. Diplomatic training warring with personal attachment and strategic necessity. Finally, then don't die. The rebellion needs you. I need you. Come back with the intelligence or don't come back at all. I won't tolerate heroic sacrifices that accomplish nothing except creating martyrs. Duly noted, Yang said with a slight smile. Though historically, my career has been defined by surviving situations where I had no business living. I'll do my best to maintain that pattern. The insertion went perfectly, which immediately made Yang suspicious. Their shuttle, disguised as an Imperial supply transport with forged authorization codes provided by sympathetic personnel inside the Imperial Logistics Corps, dashed through Fondor's defensive perimeter without challenge. They docked at the shipyard's secondary facility, the one supposedly housing Admiral Screed's private offices, where the defection meeting would occur, and disembarked into corridors that were surprisingly empty of security presence.
"It's too easy," Cassian muttered, his combat instinct screaming warning. "They should have challenged our codes, should have inspected the cargo, should have stationed troopers at every access point. This feels like they want us to reach a specific location," Yang finished. "Which means the trap isn't at the perimeter, it's deeper inside, positioned so we can't retreat once sprung. Probably in Admiral Screed's office complex, where they expect us to go for the supposed defection meeting." "So we don't go there," Reinhard said, pulling up alternative routes through the facility. "Cassian, you and Gregor proceed to the meeting location. Make it look like we fell for the bait. Draw Imperial forces to that position. The rest of us will move toward the actual objective, the computer core housing Death Star technical specifications." "You're using us as bait," Gregor observed, without apparent concern. Clones were accustomed to high-risk assignments. "I'm using you as theater," Reinhard corrected. "The Emperor expects the entire team at the meeting location. When only 2 of you appear, he'll assume we detected the trap and aborted. He'll order pursuit, believing we're fleeing, which gives the rest of us time to operate while Imperial security focuses on wrong targets." The plan proceeded with the cold efficiency that defined both admirals' operational style. Cassian and Gregor made obvious approach to Screed's office complex, triggering security responses exactly as predicted. Blast doors sealing, stormtrooper squads deploying, Admiral Screed himself appearing with dramatic villain's monologue about the Empire's inevitable victory. Standard trap choreography executed perfectly. Meanwhile, Yang led the primary team deeper into the shipyard's technical sections, using maintenance corridors and security blind spots that Kof Malen had identified through previous intelligence gathering. The Mon Calamari engineer proved invaluable. His species had designed the Rebel fleet's most effective capital ships, and his understanding of large-scale technical systems allowed him to navigate Fondor's infrastructure with intuitive ease.
"I'm in," Koth announced, his data spike interfacing with the core's access systems. "Bypassing security, encountering a resistance. There's active monitoring on these systems. Someone's watching in real time." "How long until you extract the Death Star specifications?" Yang asked, watching the corridor for inevitable Imperial response. 3 minutes for download, but they'll trace the intrusion immediately. We'll have maybe 30 seconds after download completion before stormtroopers arrive in overwhelming numbers." "Then we have 3 minutes and 30 seconds, Reinhard said, checking his stolen blaster's charge. "More than sufficient for extraction if we move efficiently." The download proceeded with agonizing slowness, percentages ticking upward while Yang's tactical sense screamed that they'd been inside too long, that Imperial security would adapt faster than anticipated, that something in their plan had already gone wrong and they just hadn't recognized it yet. At 2 minutes 40 seconds, Coates' console emitted a warning tone. "Countermeasures activating. Someone's trying to corrupt the download, inject false data into the files. Sophisticated work. This isn't automated security. This is human intelligence actively fighting me." "Can you counter it?" Yang asked. "Maybe, but it'll take longer, 5 minutes instead of 3. "We don't have 5 minutes. "Then we'll get partial data or corrupted specifications. Your choice, Admiral." Yang made the calculation instantly, the kind of impossible decision that had defined his career. Partial intelligence was better than no intelligence. Corrupted data could be identified and removed through analysis, and staying longer guaranteed capture or death. "Take what you can get in 30 seconds and we extract now."
Koth's fingers flew across the interface, prioritizing critical files over comprehensive download. weapon specifications, power generation systems, structural vulnerabilities. The information was fragmentary but potentially invaluable. At 30 seconds, he pulled the data spike and they ran. The facility's alert systems activated simultaneously, klaxons blaring, blast doors sealing, stormtrooper boots echoing through corridors from every direction. The Empire had let them penetrate deep enough to believe success was possible, had monitored their infiltration in real time, and now was springing the trap with full force. "This way," Hera transmitted through comms, her pilot's instincts somehow navigating the facility's chaos from remote observation. "Hangar Bay 7, 200 meters northwest. I've positioned the shuttle for immediate extraction, but you have maybe 90 seconds before they lock down all launch systems." They ran through corridors that erupted with blaster fire, Wolf and Reinhard returning shots with covering fire that was more suppressive than accurate. Rodus took a hit, non-lethal but incapacitating, and Reinhard simply scooped the Mon Calamari up and kept running, aristocratic pride refusing to abandon any team member regardless of tactical optimization. Hangar Bay 7's entrance was defended by an entire stormtrooper platoon, positioned in formation that suggested they'd been waiting specifically for this extraction attempt. Standard Imperial tactics: allow infiltration, permit data theft, but ensure the intelligence never leaves the facility. "I'll handle this," Yang said, and before anyone could argue, he was running directly toward the platoon with the kind of suicidal courage that had made his legend in another universe. Except it wasn't suicidal. It was calculated tactical theater. Yang ran not in straight line, but in erratic patterns, using the stormtroopers' notoriously poor aim against them, making himself maximally difficult target while simultaneously drawing their fire away from his team. He dove behind cover, then emerged from unexpected angles, then disappeared into service corridors before reappearing from directions that shouldn't have been accessible. It was performance designed to create confusion, to make Imperial forces concentrate on single visible target while the rest of his team slipped past their formation toward the waiting shuttle. "Yang, stop grandstanding and get to the shuttle," Reinhard shouted, genuine concern breaking through his usual tactical detachment.
"Momentarily," Yang replied, firing his own blaster with accuracy that suggested he'd spent considerable time practicing, despite his preference for strategic over tactical operations. 3 stormtroopers went down, not dead, but injured enough to disrupt their formation. "I'm establishing extraction window. You're welcome to proceed through it." The team reached the shuttle, Hera's engines already screaming toward launch readiness. Young sprinted across the hangar bay with blaster fire tracking his every step, his historian's mind noting that this was absurdly dramatic, and he'd much prefer surviving to creating memorable final moments. He made it aboard with seconds to spare, the shuttle launching while hangar doors tried to seal, Hera's piloting threading the impossible gap between closing blast doors with centimeters of clearance on either side. Then they were in Fondor's orbital space, surrounded by Imperial fleet elements that had been waiting for exactly this eventuality. 3 Star Destroyers in killbox formation, TIE fighters launching in swarms, tractor beams activating to capture their shuttle before it could reach hyperspace distance. "This," Young observed calmly, while alarms screamed and Hera executed evasive maneuvers that defied physics, "is why I prefer commanding from flag bridges rather than personally conducting raids." "Noted," Reinhard replied, equally calm despite circumstances that suggested imminent capture or death. "For future reference, assuming we survive to have future references, perhaps we should trust subordinate officers to handle high-risk operations." "Perhaps," Young agreed. Then Cassian's voice crackled through comms, broadcasting from elsewhere in the Fondor system. "Admirals, we've got your distraction. Recommend immediate jump to hyperspace." On the tactical display, new contacts appeared. Rebel ships emerging from hyperspace in unexpected vectors, not enough to challenge the Imperial fleet, but sufficient to create chaos. Cassian and Gregor had escaped their portion of the crap. had coordinated with rebellion forces Yang had positioned as contingency support and were now implementing the extraction plan's final phase.
The briefing room aboard the Home 1, the Mon Calamari cruiser that served as the rebellion's mobile command center, held more tension than any battle Yang had commanded in his previous universe. Around the holographic display showing the Death Star's completed form stood representatives of everything the rebellion had built over 4 desperate years. Senator Organa and Mon Mothma providing political leadership, General Jan Dodonna coordinating technical operations, Admiral Radas commanding the Mon Calamari fleet elements, and 24 fighter pilots whose faces showed the particular fatalism of soldiers preparing for suicide missions. The Death Star has arrived at Scarif, Yang announced, updating the tactical display to show the battle station's current position. Not at Alderaan. Intelligence had been wrong about the target, or perhaps the Emperor had changed plans upon detecting rebel preparations. Instead, the station orbited Scarif, a tropical world housing the Empire's primary military intelligence archives. Our window has collapsed. The station is operational now, not in weeks as we projected, which means our attack must proceed immediately before the Emperor can deploy it against rebellion assets. Scarif is heavily defended even without the Death Star, General Dodonna observed, highlighting defensive installations, planetary shield gates, orbital platforms, fleet elements including at least 2 Star Destroyers, penetrating those defenses to transmit the Death Star plans. "Wait," one of the pilots interrupted, a young Alderaanian named Bail Prester Organa, though he went by his call sign, Captain Antilles, in military operations. "Transmit the plans? I thought we already had them from the Fondor raid." "We have partial specifications," Reinhard corrected, his tactical precision demanding honesty about their intelligence limitations. "Fragmentary data sufficient to identify the thermal exhaust vulnerability, but not comprehensive enough to plan the actual attack run. Targeting vectors, defensive systems around the port, optimal approach angles, that information exists in Scarif's archives. Without it, our pilots would be attacking blind, reducing already minimal success probability to effective impossibility." "So, we need to conduct 2 simultaneous operations," Radas said, his Mon Calamari strategic thinking complementing the human admiral's approach. "A ground team infiltrates Scarif, penetrates the archives, transmits the complete technical specifications. Meanwhile, a fighter squadron stands by to receive those plans and immediately proceed to attack the Death Star before Imperial forces can respond." "Precisely," Yang confirmed. "The ground operation is already being coordinated. Cassian Andor is leading a team of special operators and volunteers. They'll insert on Scarif, fight through Imperial security, and transmit data through the planetary shield before it can be locked down. Our responsibility is ensuring that transmission reaches our fleet and that our fighters have viable attack vectors ready to execute the moment specifications arrive."
He pulled up fleet dispositions, showing the rebellion's assembled forces with brutal honesty about their limitations. "We have approximately 40 fighters, X-Wings and Y-Wings, piloted by our best personnel. Supporting them are 8 capital ships, including this cruiser and Admiral Radis's command vessel. Against the Death Star, those forces are completely insufficient for conventional engagement. The station's weapons could vaporize our entire fleet within minutes, which means we don't engage conventionally. We use the Death Star's size against it," Reinhard continued, highlighting approach vectors that exploited the station's scale. "The battle station is so large that its defensive systems are optimized for capital ship threats, not fighter-scale attacks. Our small craft can exploit blind spots in the turbo laser coverage, use the station's surface geography for cover, and approach the thermal exhaust port from angles that larger vessels couldn't navigate. "You're describing a trench run," one pilot observed, Luke Skywalker, a recent recruit whose natural piloting ability had caught Yang's attention during training exercises. Flying through the station's surface trenches to reach the exhaust port while under fire from defensive positions and TIE fighters? That's gonna cost us most of the squadron. Yes, Yang agreed, refusing to offer false comfort. Statistically, survival probability for individual pilots is less than 30%. For the squadron as a whole, completing the mission requires sacrifices that will devastate our fighter corps. I won't lie to you, this operation will kill most of you. The question is whether dying to destroy the Death Star serves strategic purpose, or whether we should preserve forces for longer-term resistance. The room fell silent, pilots exchanging glances, processing the reality that their commanding admiral had just openly acknowledged they were being sent to die. Most military leaders avoided such bluntness, preferring patriotic rhetoric about duty and honor. Yang's brutal honesty was simultaneously refreshing and terrifying. "With respect, Admiral," Skywalker said, his young voice carrying conviction that reminded Yang painfully of himself at that age. "I didn't join the rebellion to preserve my life. I joined because the Empire murdered my family, because tyranny needs to be opposed regardless of personal cost. If dying to destroy their planet killer means other families won't suffer what mine did, that's purpose enough." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled pilots, soldiers who'd already accepted death as probable outcome the moment they chose resistance over submission. Yang felt something tighten in his chest, the same sensation he'd experienced countless times watching Alliance personnel fly into battles they wouldn't survive, believing in ideals that justified any sacrifice. "Then we proceed," he said quietly. "Fighter squadrons will divide into 3 groups. Red Squadron, commanded by Commander Skywalker, will conduct the primary assault on the thermal exhaust port. Gold Squadron provides bomber support, engaging defensive positions to create attack windows. Blue Squadron maintains space superiority, protecting the assault groups from TIE fighter interference."
Admiral Raddus, your capital ships engage the Death Star at maximum range, not to inflict damage, which is impossible with conventional weapons, but to draw turbolaser fire away from the fighter groups. Make yourselves targets, force the Empire to divide attention between capital and fighter threats. "Understood," Raddus acknowledged, "though it means my vessels will absorb punishment we can't effectively return." "It means your sacrifice creates opportunities for the mission to succeed," Reinhard corrected, his aristocratic bluntness somehow less harsh than Yang's egalitarian honesty. "Your crews understand this. They've accepted it. Honor their willingness by ensuring their deaths achieve strategic purpose." "One more thing," Yang added, addressing the entire assembled force. "If we succeed, if the Death Star is destroyed, the Emperor will retaliate massively. Every world that supported the rebellion, every system that's provided resources or sanctuary, will face Imperial reprisals that make previous atrocities seem restrained. Victory today means escalation tomorrow. Some of you will survive this battle, only to die in the Emperor's response. I need you to understand that before we commit." "Admiral Yang," Mon Mothma said, her diplomatic composure strained by the weight of decisions being made. "You're asking these people to die today and warning survivors they'll probably die tomorrow. That's not exactly inspirational leadership." I'm not trying to inspire. I'm trying to ensure informed consent. These soldiers deserve to know what their sacrifice purchases. Not immediate peace, not guaranteed victory, but continued resistance against a regime that will fight even more brutally once we've demonstrated we can threaten its ultimate weapon. They deserve honesty about costs before accepting them. Senator Organa stepped forward. His political instincts recognized the moment required different rhetoric than Yang's stark realism. Everything Admiral Yang says is true. This battle will be costly. Imperial retaliation will be brutal. But it will also prove something the Empire has tried to destroy. That tyranny can be challenged. That no weapon guarantees submission. That people fighting for freedom can achieve impossible victories against overwhelming odds. The Death Star isn't just a battle station, it's a symbol. The Empire's ultimate statement that resistance is futile, that power through fear can control trillions. If we destroy it, if we prove that genius and courage can overcome engineered invincibility, we don't just eliminate a weapon, we shatter the psychological foundation of Imperial control. Every world watching will see that the Emperor can be beaten, that his weapons can be destroyed, that hope survives even in darkest circumstances.
The pilots responded to Organa's rhetoric, where they'd simply absorbed Yang's honesty, standing straighter, expressions shifting from resigned fatalism to determined purpose. Yang noted the transformation with his usual analytical detachment while simultaneously recognizing its necessity. He could provide tactical truth, but soldiers needed emotional motivation that his personality couldn't supply. Organa's gift was making sacrifice seem meaningful rather than merely necessary. "To your fighters," Reinhard ordered, his command presence asserting itself. "Launch in 15 minutes. Admiral Yang and I will coordinate from the Home One's bridge. Senators, you should evacuate to safer positions. If this goes poorly, the rebellion will need political leadership to survive." "We're staying," Mon Mothma said firmly. "If our military personnel are willing to die, our political leaders can at least witness their sacrifice." The Battle of Yavin, historians would later call it that, naming the conflict for the gas giant the Death Star orbited while targeting the rebellion's Yavin 4 base, unfolded with the brutal efficiency Yang had predicted and the chaos that no planning could completely account for. Cassian's ground team on Scarif succeeded against impossible odds, fighting through Imperial security to transmit the complete Death Star specifications moments before the battle station's superlaser reduced the entire facility to plasma. The Rebellion's fleet received the data, detailed technical plans showing not just the thermal exhaust port's existence, but the precise approach vectors, defensive system locations, optimal targeting solutions, and confirming what they'd already suspected. The attack was effectively a suicide run. The trench leading to the exhaust port was 3 kilometers long, lined with defensive turrets, and narrow enough that fighters would have to fly single file while under constant fire. TIE fighters could pursue into the trench, attacking from behind, where X-wing defensive capabilities were minimal. And the shot itself, 2 meters wide, requiring proton torpedoes to travel down a shaft several kilometers deep before reaching the reactor, was beyond normal targeting computer capabilities.
"It's impossible," General Dodonna muttered, studying the specifications from the Home One's bridge. "No human pilot could make that shot. The variables are too complex, the target too small, the defensive fire too intense." "Impossible by conventional assessment," Young agreed, watching tactical displays showing Red Squadron beginning their attack run. Which is why the Empire didn't adequately defend it. They assumed rationality would prevent anyone from attempting something this suicidal. They calculated probability and determined the vulnerability was acceptable risk. They didn't account for desperate humans with nothing left to lose, Reinhard added, his own tactical displays tracking Gold Squadron's bomber runs against defensive positions, or for the Force, these Jedi powers that apparently allow instinctive targeting beyond technological precision. If any of these pilots have Force sensitivity, even unconscious ability, then maybe, just maybe, impossible becomes merely improbable. The battle devolved into exactly the grinding attrition Young had predicted. Gold Squadron's Y-wing bombers engaged defensive positions, drawing fire while attempting to create attack windows for Red Squadron's assault craft. Blue Squadron fought desperate dogfights against TIE fighter swarms, sacrificing themselves to protect the primary assault groups. And Red Squadron, led by Luke Skywalker, with a combination of natural ability and something that might have been Force guidance, entered the trench run that would determine the rebellion's survival. Red 5 and Red 2 are down, the communications officer reported, voice strained by watching pilots die in real time. Red Leader is making his attack approach. He's taking fire, shields are failing. The tactical display showed Red Leader's fighter exploding in a burst of energy, the squadron commander dying meters from the exhaust port without successfully firing his torpedoes. Of the 12 fighters that had begun the trench run, only 3 remained, and one of those was damaged badly enough that its survival was measured in seconds rather than minutes. Red 5, that's Skywalker, is beginning final attack run. He's disabled his targeting computer. Admiral, he's attempting the shot manually. Yang and Reinhardt exchanged glances, both recognizing the madness and the necessity. Targeting computers couldn't calculate the shot. The variables exceeded their processing capabilities, which meant human instinct, Force-enhanced perception, or sheer desperate luck became the only viable options. "Give him covering fire," Reinhard ordered, knowing it was futile but unwilling to let a pilot die without attempting support. "All remaining fighters protect Red 5 during his attack run."
Then Darth Vader entered the battle. The Dark Lord's TIE advanced fighter appeared on tactical displays like a nightmare made manifest, moving with precision that suggested Force-enhanced piloting, targeting with accuracy that defied normal human capability. 2 rebel fighters died in seconds, Vader's shots placed with surgical perfection. He was targeting Skywalker specifically, Young realized, not the other pilots, not the capital ships, but the single fighter attempting the impossible shot that might destroy the Emperor's ultimate weapon. "Vader recognizes him," Young said quietly, watching the pursuit unfold. "Recognizes his Force potential, or perhaps recognizes something more personal. He's not trying to simply destroy Red 5, he's hunting him specifically." "Then Red 5 needs a miracle," Reinhardt replied, his tactical assessment brutal. "Because Vader is going to kill him before he reaches firing position, and we have no assets capable of intervening. The battle's over. We've failed." Except they hadn't. A freighter, the Millennium Falcon, captained by a smuggler named Han Solo, who'd been recruited weeks earlier for unrelated operations, appeared from hyperspace at impossible coordinates, emerged directly into the battle with the kind of reckless timing that suggested either Force guidance or suicidal stupidity. Solo's vessel targeted Vader's TIE fighter with accuracy that shouldn't have been possible for a freighter's weaponry, forcing the Dark Lord to abort his attack run and maneuver defensively. And in that moment, that single window of opportunity created by a smuggler's intervention, Luke Skywalker fired his proton torpedoes. The shot was impossible. Every tactical analysis said so. Every probability calculation insisted it couldn't work.
but the torpedoes entered the thermal exhaust port, traveled down the shaft toward the Death Star's reactor, and detonated with chain reaction fury that consumed the battle station from within. For 3 seconds, nothing seemed to happen. The Death Star continued existing, its massive form dominating visual displays, seemingly invincible despite the rebellion's desperate attack. Then cracks appeared across its surface, energy bleeding through superstructure, the reactor's destruction propagating through systems designed to contain planet-destroying power. The Death Star exploded. The detonation was visible across the entire Yavin system, a newborn star that briefly outshone the gas giant, a bloom of nuclear fire that represented trillions of credits and thousands of lives consumed in an instant. The Emperor's ultimate weapon, the symbol of absolute Imperial power, reduced to expanding debris field by a single lucky shot from a desperate pilot. "Impossible," General Dodonna whispered, his strategic experience unable to process what sensors confirmed. "We actually did it. We destroyed the Death Star." "We survived," Yang corrected, his historian's perspective recognizing that survival wasn't victory, merely continued existence. "We eliminated the immediate threat, proved the Empire isn't invincible, gave the rebellion a symbolic victory that will inspire recruitment and resistance. But the war isn't over. If anything, it's just begun." "The Emperor will retaliate," Reinhard agreed, already composing orders for fleet dispersal and base evacuation. "He'll commit resources we can't match, conduct reprisals that make previous atrocities seem restrained, dedicate himself to destroying the rebellion completely. We've proven we're an existential threat to his power. That makes us his primary target above all other strategic concerns. Then we adapt," Mon Mothma said, her political courage matching her military commander's tactical realism. "We've demonstrated that determined resistance can achieve impossible victories. Now we prove it wasn't luck or fluke, but the beginning of sustained campaign against Imperial tyranny. Senators Organa, Amidala, and myself will coordinate diplomatic outreach, recruiting systems that see the Death Star's destruction as evidence the Empire can be defeated. Admirals Yang and Reinhard will continue building military forces capable of challenging Imperial fleets in conventional engagement." "And what about them?" Padme asked, gesturing toward the tactical displays showing surviving pilots returning to the Home One's hangar bay. "The people who actually won this battle, the pilots who died, the soldiers who sacrificed everything to create this moment. What do we tell their victory means?" Yang considered this, his analytical mind processing strategic implications, while his conscience, that persistent voice he'd never fully silenced despite decades of pragmatic military command, insisted honest answer was required.
"We tell them the truth," he said finally, "that their sacrifice purchased time, created opportunity, proved that resistance matters even against overwhelming power, that the cost was terrible, but the alternative was submission, that victory requires continued sacrifice, possibly for generations, until either the Empire falls or the rebellion is destroyed completely. We tell them that hope survives because they were willing to die for it. And we tell them," Reinhard added, his aristocratic certainty softening into something that might have been respect, that two admirals from another universe, who'd spent their careers fighting each other across galaxies, learned something from their courage. That watching ordinary people achieve impossible victories has reminded us why conflict matters, why principles justify sacrifice, why some wars must be fought regardless of cost. Yang glanced at his rival, surprised by the admission. "You've changed, Reinhard. 4 years ago, you would have calculated this battle purely in strategic terms, resource expenditure versus strategic gain.
acceptable losses for objective achievement. Now you're talking about principles and meaning. 4 years ago, Reinhard replied, I believed benevolent autocracy could solve problems democracy couldn't address. Then I watched Palpatine demonstrate exactly where that philosophy leads: manipulation, oppression, genocide in the name of order. You've changed too, Yang. 4 years ago, you would have questioned whether this rebellion served legitimate democratic ideals or just replaced one flawed system with another. Now you're fighting without reservation. Because I've learned that perfect isn't the enemy of good, Yang admitted. The rebellion isn't perfect democracy, isn't ideal government. We'll probably make terrible mistakes if we eventually win. But it's trying to restore choice, to give people voice in their governance, to oppose tyranny through principles rather than just different tyranny. That's worth fighting for, even if the outcome is uncertain. Around them, the Home One's bridge crew processed sensor data showing complete Death Star destruction and began calculating what such an impossible victory might mean for the galaxy. Rebellion personnel celebrated with the desperate joy of people who'd accepted death and somehow survived. Senators coordinated communications to Allied systems, spreading news of Imperial defeat that would inspire resistance across thousands of worlds. And 2 admirals from another universe, enemies who'd become reluctant allies, strategists who'd learned that genius alone couldn't guarantee victory, humans who'd been reminded that ordinary people fighting for principles could achieve miracles, stood together watching the expanding debris field that had once been tyranny's ultimate symbol. We should start planning immediate evacuation, Reinhard said after a long silence. The Emperor knows our location now. He'll send everything, entire fleet battle groups, Vader personally, possibly superweapons we haven't yet detected. Yavin 4 is compromised the moment we achieved victory here.
Agreed, Young replied. Senator Organa, coordinate base evacuation. All personnel, equipment, and intelligence archives relocated within 48 hours. We disperse the fleet. Establish multiple hidden bases instead of single centralized location. Ensure no single Imperial strike can destroy the rebellion's operational capacity.
And then?
Mon Mothma asked. Then we build, Young said simply. We've proven the Empire can be beaten. Now we prove it can be defeated. We recruit, train, coordinate, conduct operations that make Imperial control increasingly costly. We fight a long war, the kind of generational conflict that requires patience and determination and willingness to sacrifice everything for eventual victory that we might not live to see. Sounds exhausting, Senator Amidala observed. It is, Reinhard confirmed, but it's also necessary, and, he glanced at Yang with something that might have been genuine respect, it's what we do best. Fighting impossible wars, achieving unlikely victories, refusing to accept that superior power guarantees submission. Speaking of which, Yang said, pulling up new intelligence reports already arriving from across the galaxy, we should probably discuss our next strategic priorities. The Death Star's destruction will inspire resistance, yes, but it will also trigger Imperial consolidation that makes future operations more difficult. We need to exploit this window before the Emperor recovers from his strategic setback. Always planning 3 moves ahead, Reinhard observed with a slight smile. Some things never change, Young. Even in another universe, facing completely different enemies, you're still the strategic obsessive who can't celebrate victory without immediately worrying about the next battle. And you're still the ambitious aristocrat who sees every setback as opportunity for advancement, Young countered, but without hostility. Even now, you're calculating how the rebellion can exploit the Empire's vulnerability, how we can expand operations, how victory in one battle creates conditions for victory in the next. Some things transcend universes. They stood together in the Home One's bridge, two admirals who'd fought across galaxies in their own universe, now united against tyranny in a reality not their own. The rebellion celebrated around them, but both knew the hard truth that historical perspective and military genius revealed. This victory was beginning, not ending. The war would continue, maybe for years, maybe for decades. The Empire would retaliate with fury that would make previous atrocities seem restrained. Millions would die before any final resolution. The path ahead was brutal, uncertain, possibly hopeless.
The Imperial fleet responded exactly as predicted, dividing attention between the shuttle and the new threats, creating momentary gaps in the tractor beam coverage. Hera exploited those gaps with pilot's instinct, her Twi'lek reflexes pushing the shuttle past effective engagement range, past gravity well interference, into hyperspace, before the Imperials could re-establish control. They'd survived. Against strategic impossibility, against operational incompetence that had put both military commanders at risk, against the Empire's deliberate trap. They'd survived, and they had the Death Star intelligence. The intelligence analysis took 3 days. 3 days during which Young and Reinhard barely slept, coordinating with technical experts to parse fragmentary data and identify what was genuine versus what was Imperial disinformation. The result was simultaneously encouraging and terrifying. The Death Star is vulnerable, Raddus announced to the assembled rebellion leadership, his injuries from Fondor already healing thanks to Mon Calamari regenerative biology. The station's primary weapon, a super laser capable of destroying planets, requires massive power generation. That power is produced by a hypermatter reactor located in the station's core. Standard design would include redundant shielding, multiple access points, comprehensive security. But the specifications we recovered show a vulnerability. He highlighted a section of the technical schematics, a tiny port that seemed insignificant amid the battle station's overwhelming scale. An exhaust port, 2 meters wide, leads directly from the surface to the main reactor. It's shielded against capital ship weapons. No turbo laser or ion cannon could exploit it. But a small fighter, something agile enough to navigate the station's surface defenses, could potentially fire ordnance directly into the port. If the shot reaches the reactor before defense systems respond, the chain reaction would destroy the entire station. A 2-meter target, Reinhard said skeptically, on a battle station the size of a small moon, defended by thousands of turbo lasers and TIE fighters, requiring a fighter pilot to execute a precision shot that most targeting computers can't calculate. Those odds are
impossible by conventional assessment, Yang agreed, which is exactly why the Empire didn't consider it a viable vulnerability. They designed the Death Star, assuming enemies would attack with capital ships and fleet tactics. A single fighter exploiting a design flaw through precision strike wasn't in their strategic calculus. "Can we even attempt this?" Mon Mothma asked, her political instincts recognizing that they were discussing an operation that would commit the rebellion's entire military capacity to a single desperate gambit. "If we fail, if the Death Star survives our attack, the Empire will retaliate by destroying worlds that support us. The consequences of failure are genocide on an unprecedented scale."
The consequences of inaction are the same, Reinhard countered. The Death Star will become operational eventually. When it does, the Empire will demonstrate its power by destroying a rebel-sympathetic world. Alderaan, maybe. A highly visible target with your political leadership, Senator Organa. They'll annihilate billions to prove resistance is futile. We can accept inevitable atrocity, or we can attempt to prevent it despite impossible odds. How long until the station is operational? Bail Organa asked, his voice strained by the mention of his homeworld's potential destruction. Intelligence suggests 6 months, maybe less if the Emperor prioritizes construction over safety protocols, which means we have 6 months to plan an attack, to assemble resources, to train pilots for a mission that has never been attempted at this scale. 6 months to prepare for the battle that will determine whether the rebellion survives or becomes a historical footnote about failed resistance. The room fell silent, strategic implications overwhelming even experienced leaders. They were discussing attacking a battle station designed to be invulnerable, exploiting a weakness that might not even work in practice, gambling everything on an operation that conventional military wisdom insisted was suicidal. "Then we have work to do," Reinhard said, his voice carrying the same aristocratic authority that had commanded fleets numbering thousands in another universe. 6 months to build a fleet, train pilots, coordinate operations across the galaxy. 6 months to transform this rebellion from scattered resistance into a military force capable of challenging the Empire's ultimate weapon. "And if we fail?" Padme Amidala asked quietly.
Yang met her eyes with the honesty that had defined his career. "Then we fail fighting rather than living as subjects of a regime that destroys worlds to maintain power. I've spent my entire career accepting impossible odds because the alternative was surrender. This galaxy deserves the same consideration I gave my own." The rebellion had its target. The Death Star would be their ultimate test, the battle that would prove whether genius and determination could overcome overwhelming military superiority, whether hope could survive against engineered despair. 2 admirals from another universe, leading a rebellion in a galaxy not their own, preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of trillions. Some would call it madness. Yang and Reinhard called it Tuesday. But for the first time since arriving in this galaxy, Yang and Reinhard felt something they hadn't experienced since the dimensional rift had torn them from their universe. Purpose. Not the hollow purpose of endless conflict, not the pragmatic purpose of survival, but genuine commitment to ideals that transcended personal ambition or strategic calculation. They'd been brought here by accident, stranded in a galaxy not their own, forced to fight a war that wasn't theirs to wage. But they'd found meaning in that struggle, proof that principles could overcome power, that human courage could achieve impossible victories, that democracy, however flawed, deserved defense against tyranny, however efficient. The Force had brought them here for a reason, and they would ensure that reason wasn't wasted. 6 months after the Battle of Yavin, the rebellion continued its operations from hidden bases scattered across the Outer Rim. Imperial retaliation had been exactly as brutal as Yang predicted. Entire systems suspected of rebel sympathies subjected to orbital bombardment, populations relocated or eliminated, resources commandeered for military buildup. The Emperor was wounded but not defeated, his regime functioning with the ruthless efficiency that had established it in the first place. But something had changed fundamentally. The Death Star's destruction had shattered the illusion of Imperial invincibility.
Recruitment surged as worlds previously too terrified to resist recognized that the Empire could be beaten. Defections from Imperial military increased as officers questioned whether serving tyranny was preferable to risking resistance. And across the galaxy, ordinary people began believing that freedom might be achievable rather than merely aspirational. Yang and Reinhard stood on the Home One's bridge, reviewing intelligence reports that suggested the Emperor was constructing a second Death Star. Because of course he was, because tyrants never learned that superweapons created vulnerabilities rather than guarantees. They would eventually need to destroy that station too, would need to risk everything again on desperate operations against impossible odds. "We might never return to our universe," Yang said quietly, addressing the reality they'd both avoided discussing. "The dimensional rift that brought us here is gone. We found no evidence of similar phenomena, no techniques for forcing passage between realities. This galaxy might be our permanent home."
Some warriors transcend universes. Some conflicts matter more than personal ambition. Some alliances form not from shared ideology, but from mutual recognition that certain battles must be fought regardless of cost. Yang Wen-li and Reinhard von Lohengramm had become exactly what this galaxy needed. Brilliant strategists freed from the constraints of their own conflict, dedicated to opposing tyranny without the ideological baggage that had defined their original war, united by principles that transcended the political philosophies that had once made them enemies. The Galactic Civil War would continue for years. The Empire would build more superweapons, conduct more atrocities, resist with every resource at its disposal. Victory was uncertain. Costs would be terrible. Sacrifices would be required that neither admiral could fully anticipate. But they'd accepted those terms, had embraced the challenge of fighting a war where success meant creating democracy that worked better than what they'd known in their own universe, where victory required building systems that could resist the corruption and inefficiency that had plagued both the Galactic Empire and Free Planets Alliance. Two admirals from a galaxy far, far away in a different sense than anyone in this universe understood, brought here by accident, committed by choice, fighting for a cause that transcended their origins. The rebellion would remember them not as foreign consultants or temporary allies, but as founders who'd helped transform scattered resistance into organized movement capable of challenging tyranny on galactic scale. As strategists whose brilliance had turned impossible battles into unlikely victories. As leaders who'd proven that genius combined with principle could overcome power combined with oppression. And maybe, just maybe, when this war eventually ended, when democracy was restored, or the rebellion was destroyed, or some compromise was reached that neither side anticipated, the historians would record that two admirals from Legend of the Galactic Heroes met Star Wars and changed both forever. Until then, they had work to do, battles to plan, operations to coordinate, a galaxy to save one strategic decision at a time. May the Force be with them, because they'd need every advantage they could get.